crazy. But Zealous, thank you for not being scared away from that open panel. Can you hear us? Zealous. I don't think she can. Zealous! Zealous, you. Yes, you. You. Zealous, you. Zealous. Okay, I'm gonna DM her.
We can hear, but I think her mic isn't working for some reason.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll work on that in the background. While we're doing that, Shay, I'd say so many nice things about her. Shay, thanks for coming through. I know you. I know your voice. Because you appear with another of our panelists on a thing, right? A YouTube channel that you guys are doing together. How are you? And introduce yourself to the audience.
I'm really great. I'm actually really excited. I'm really new to streaming. Like you said, me and Katie just started doing a little podcast. So, I'm just really excited to get to know everyone, see everyone's views, and, just hash it out, I guess.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Next, we'll go to someone who is not quite a stranger. April. April's back with us. April, who joined us on that from his panel, Mr. Girl, right? But April, thanks for coming back. Thanks for not being scared away from that one. Oh boy, I have a lot of panels that might terrify individuals, but April, I think you handled yourself really well in that one. So I'm really glad that you stopped by and joined us once again. How are you?
Doing good. Champion of the PrimeCayes panel has returned and talk about some politics. I think it'll be fun. Taftage or April, you can call me. I do Twitch politics and share all sorts of opinions. Sometimes they're super cringe, sometimes they're really good. That's just how it goes. Hopefully it'll be a fun conversation.
Okay. All right. All right. So last, but not quite last really, but I'm
We're waiting on Zealous.
We're working on it. We're working on it. But we have Katie. I am so pleased to have her here. Katie is the one who helped put this together. It was her idea. She demanded it. And I acquiesced, right? I do that a lot. But Katie, she's been an amazing member of this community, right? Fantastic. And she stepped up. She's like, I want this to happen. And she assembled this, right? So thank you, Katie.
Yeah, I think what I wanted is an excuse to hang out with a bunch of people I thought were cool. So I just invited a bunch of my friends and people I don't get to hang out with a lot. And we just pretend that it's a panel. And we're actually just going to talk about nail polish and hair. And that's what we're doing. This was all a trick, Prime. I'm sorry.
No, you got me.
But it's fine because you let us talk about men for like 2 seconds and it will get heated. So it's fine.
I'm waiting for it. Zealous, can you hear us? Can you hear me? You're muted in Discord right now. I'm not sure if you can. Do I have a mod in chat? Maybe Matt Lattin's around who can assist us with that. I'll send him a message. Maybe he can assist. But okay, well, we'll do that in the background and hopefully we can get that.
Maybe if you need one of those chocolates, Prime, Matt Lattin would come and help.
No thanks.
Why not?
All right. We'll get started, and I'm gonna work on that in the background. All right. Topic 1. Jack Wright and Sienna Mae Gomez are 2 incredibly successful social media influencers. They are TikTok stars with gargantuan channels who collaborated together to make content. Now, Jack is accusing Sienna of sexual assault. Previously, they were both minors during their working relationship. This follows many other allegations of assault or abuse directed at various online creators. However, the response to this particular incident is decidedly mixed. If the allegations against Sienna are true, is this incident as damaging as when a male forces himself onto a woman? Sienna and Jack were at various times romantically involved. Does that change how the situation should be viewed? Do women get away with violations against men more? If so, is this a problem that deserves serious societal consideration? This is a very extensive question. I want to be proud of myself, okay? All right. So lots of things to talk about here. We'll do opening statements. We'll start with our good friend Zonia, please.
Yeah, so I didn't even know who these two were until I got the topics for this panel, and so I had to do a little bit of research and learn about who they were and what it was all about. And it does seem like a pretty clear case of sexual assault, but it looks like there was a close friendship that may have gotten even closer than friendship at a couple instances, and that might have been used to sort of excuse away the sexual assault. But I think that one of the big issues that I've definitely observed, and I decided to paste into our group chat. This is a video that I saw a couple years ago when I was interested in the topic of um, men being emasculated in the media, in popular media in particular, and sexual assault of men being downplayed, and how it's a problem that is not only just culturally reinforced, but continually reinforced in our everyday movies,
It's
cartoons,
the pop
shows, even
culture
children's
detective
shows,
video, by the
which
way.
I felt was an interesting thing to observe. And like rape jokes and prison rape jokes are common, um, to hint at and laugh at the fragility of men and the emasculation of men. And so I see that a lot of similar kind of echoes of that going on with the dialogue around this particular situation. And so, yeah, I think this is something that is downplayed too much. It's used to sort of mock, and uh, it, it greatly inhibits the ability for or prevents men from being more open about these experiences that they have and the assaults that they've suffered. And yeah, I think it's something that we need to open society's eyes to more, and make it make men feel empowered to speak up about these things without fear of being mocked.
Thank you, Pixel.
For me, the takeaway from this situation, or at least how I've been thinking about it, is that sexual assault is obviously never okay, but there is some extremely difficult things that we have to navigate now in society, including these very well publicized relationships between young people. Um, I can't even imagine how difficult it must be these days to navigate a personal life as a teenager, especially if you're making content out of your life and then having something like this happen in front of millions of people. Kind of like what Zonia was saying about how men in this situation kind of get mocked and ridiculed, but like, oh, you should be, oh, mate, like, why do you even care? Like, that's a huge problem. And it's also a huge problem how quickly people are willing to jump on a woman who is accused of sexual assault, because I also think that kind of manifests within the patriarchy as well. So I just think it's a really complex time to navigate these things in a public forum. That being said, I obviously want to bookend saying that with sexual assault is never okay, no matter who you are, between whoever. Um, but yeah, I think we'll have some very interesting discussions about this evening. That's probably where I was.
Let's go to Cyrus.
Yeah. There was like one thing that stuck out to me there, one question that you asked, which is about like, I'm probably going to phrase this poorly, but whether or not it's worse if it's a woman being assaulted. It's something that like I've been turning over in my head. I think that regardless of whether or not it is, I think people have like an instinctive revulsion towards it, specifically like penetration, regardless of whether or not it's a woman or a man being penetrated. I think that is where people have like the most instinctive revulsion and disgust and fear. Like they imagine being very afraid at that prospect, but it doesn't matter. That's kind of like what I want to come to is like, it doesn't matter that feeling or whether or not it's correct. What matters is it's all completely wrong. If you violate somebody's consent, you're a piece of shit. It looks very clearly to me like this woman violated his consent. They have videos of it. It's like almost like a case closed as much as it can be on a social media social media site.
Thank you. All right. Let's go to Lana.
Yeah, clearly, like, sexual assault is wrong, no matter like who's perpetrating it, no matter who the victim is. The victim being like a man or somebody who's viewed as like having power in a situation like shouldn't matter. And clearly, like something like preventative, like a preventative measure would be something like comprehensive sex education that actually talks about like consent for like young people who are like just forming their identities around sexuality and understanding like how to engage with sex in a healthy way, learning about their bodies and all that would be a much better approach than basically ignoring the problem and hoping that, if you just shame people for making mistakes they've been taught to do, like, you're basically just going to beat the problem to death. And I'm not saying people shouldn't be accountable for their actions. I'm just saying, like, if you want to resolve the problem, like, you need better sex ed, and that's like a really good place to start.
Okay. Let's go to Shay.
So, going into this, I was kind of like, I didn't really know where to start. I kind of went in with the bias that even if these sexual assaults do happen to men, it's probably not as much as women. And going into it, I realized like that's a really toxic sort of bias that I had. And sort of realized that no matter what type of relationship you have to sort of set up these boundaries. There was a discussion we had a while ago where, you're not going to ask permission to touch your partner's ass. You know what I mean? That's just like, that might be it. And because that's a pre-established boundary. But a lot of us don't really grow up with that kind of knowledge, with that kind of instruction. And so the lines can sometimes blur and get very messy. And I just think, kind of going off what Lana said, that's a really important sexual education, and being able to have your child, or when they're growing up, being able to come to you and express certain things, and you being able to maybe correct problematic behavior and help them. I think that's a good place to start.
Thank you. All right, let's go to April.
Great. I think it's really difficult to analyze someone else's relationship from the outside in. And whenever these sorts of things come up in regards to any crime, really, I think that everyone's very eager to jump in and to talk about, to drop their hot takes. But ultimately, looking in from the outside, I think that it's so easy to not understand people's dynamic. So I think that, like, it might be good in this conversation to like broaden things out to just generally talking about sex and consent and relationships and the differences between how that works for one gender or another. And I'll say that there's a lot of ways to violate consent, right? It's not just about penetration. And I think penetration is one of these things that, like, it's the easiest to imagine. It's the easiest one to think about because it's so obvious, like, how it's wrong and how negative it is. But I think for like a lot of men, and this is maybe something that is hard to understand, like if you don't have a penis, but like there's such a thing as like continued consent throughout sex. And like, just for example, like if you're having sex with someone and you've agreed to like pull out and they're not like letting you, that can be a violation of consent that's like very serious that men have to deal with and navigate. And so I think that that's part of it. With like Jack Wright and Sienna Mae Gomez, people have talked about like the videos, and those seem like pretty bad as well. I just think that like with these things, we have to kind of wait until more information is brought out with like a court case or whatever. And it sometimes feels a little bit gross to me to like speculate on it without that added information. But I just want to echo like what other people on the panel have already said, which is like it's really important for you to get consent and to get continued consent from people. And it definitely does not cut just one way. Consent is important to get from men and for men as well. So yeah, that's all I've got to say.
Katie.
So I was kind of like Zonia in the sense that I had no idea who these people are, and then I had to go and read a little bit. I haven't watched the videos in terms of the actual scandal. I'm happy that he felt safe and able to come forward with how he feels and what he's been through. I think that's very brave as a guy. I think it's a lot less normalized. And so I was happy that he's done that. In terms of their actual relationship, it sounds like there was confusion or whatever. It doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, he felt very much violated, and that's a huge problem. So that's like in terms of the prompt. I'm hearing, of course, I agree with a lot of things that were said by everyone. I would just like to I think it's interesting how when this prompt comes up, we're talking about like general consent and like it's not about like men and women. When if it was talking about a scandal where a woman was hurt by a guy, I assume our openings would be a bit different. And we would talk about how women are in society and what burden that is and blah and blah blah. And I just want to, if I'm getting that impression correctly, I would like personally to discuss the aspect of, yes, I would like to talk about consent, but I think there's an important element to it that in the same way that women aren't very socialized to learn that it's okay that they are not enjoying something and they have the right to stop or whatever, I think men are not socialized to even ask themselves, do I want this? So there are huge issues of socialization on both sides. And I think maybe because I've been in leftist spaces a lot, it's I've had the conversation about the women's stuff. I would like to talk about how men kind of have it rough in this respect as well. Although I agree that there is like obvious harm for everyone, I think. So that would be my point.
Just to clarify, like my own position, because I don't know if I'm assuming I'm one of the people you're referring to there. I just want to like draw parallels. And like
I actually don't think I was talking about you. If you want, I can call out the other people I was.
no.
Yeah, shame. Looking at you. No, it's fine.
No, you have a hard time of truly understanding something. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay, it's good.
I want to say that's an interesting point to make. Like, I agree. Like, clearly, if we were talking, I get what you're saying. Like, you're really talking about like we should be discussing the gender dynamic related rather than like consent in general. And I agree, like, obviously there's always like more conversations to be had about consent, like at any point in time. Clearly if you've like been in a really healthy relationship where you're like doing a lot of things where you're like talking about consent a lot, like you can
Never
always talk
happened.
about it more. But I get what you're saying, like really like talking about how like men don't even ask themselves the question, like even in like the BDSM community, like a lot of people don't even realize that like doms should also be able to say no to something that they're uncomfortable with.
Yeah,
And
I
it's
just,
not just about like receiving
I jumped in
something,
the
it's
panel,
also
like,
about
late.
like feeling comfortable like doing things to
I
other
wasn't
people.
super
And like
prepared. So
obviously
this is
not
how it
all men
goes.
are doms or whatever. I know that's a hot take. But clearly like thinking I get what you're getting at about like also thinking about the gender dynamics for men as well. That was interesting.
Yeah, I think in like in leftist spaces, or we've both been on CC a lot, right? Colloquian Club, and there seems to be like a general awareness, at least in out of the people who I know are on this panel, that like there are certain issues with like in terms of how women deal with this situation. But it's kind of like how women will talk about feminism, and then a guy would be like, we have it rough too. But then we never get to talk about how they have it rough because we. So I think the prompt is really important to bring out how there are certain things that men have to deal with that, and like to be very honest, I do care about humans, whoever they are, but I think that the issues with the way men are being socialized and the things that are hurting them are coming back to bite women in the ass. So it's not like I don't have a personal interest in this.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to suggest as well, is kind of bringing up that it's a toxic kind of toxic masculinity that's bolstered by this mocking of the emasculation of men, right? So when it's common in our culture and in media and such, constantly reinforced that to be sexually assaulted is a form of weakness and a way of like emasculating and often feminizing a man, that comes back to bite us in the long run, because that perpetuates more of this toxic masculine kind of mentality of that you shouldn't, that it's weak and demeaning to have been related to femininity and to be emasculated, right? So it feeds the problem. And I think that's one of the issues that I remember witnessing when I was a kid. So I was raised masculine, right? And some of my friends were boys, and during that time you were kind of more encouraged to stay with your own gender, so to speak, right? And it was discouraged to hang around with girls because it was considered to be feminine and thus weak, and you would be berated not only by other boys but even by the men in your life and the father figures. And then inevitably I knew other boys who had been sexually assaulted, and they were afraid to even say anything about it because of that. And the worst of the ones were the ones that came out, particularly when they were sexually assaulted by women, older women, because the men in their lives would brush it off, would either not believe them at all or would brush it off as like, hey, you just scored with a woman. What are you talking about? And this is from like teachers, like adult women sexually assaulting their students and such, or sexually assaulting boys that they're around. And father figures and fathers and gym teachers and other men in their lives basically brushing it off as, why are you even complaining? So there's so much of a cultural problem around this. Is it to have two things pressing in on you? One is the emasculation and the way you look to the rest of society, that you've been now equated to woman, which is supposed to be weak and detestable and such. And then you've got the other side of it, which is like, what are you talking about? Why are you even complaining? You just scored. And you get a very, from that other side, you get a um, different kind of situation when it comes to what society recognizes as women, like um, being sexually assaulted. Suddenly, all the men in their lives are like, "Holy shit, pitchforks and torches, and we need to protect our girls and all that," right?
Yeah.
So that's
It's
sort of
actually
what
kind of
I wanted
interesting
to
what
bring
you're
up.
saying, because my focus isn't about like the emasculation aspect of it, although I understand like what you're saying. All the TV like moments that I remember from with that have to do with this topic are like, it's a movie and a sexual act start, and it's very clear that the guy is not into it. She's either old or ugly, or he has a girlfriend or whatever. Then she starts performing on him, and then because it's a comedy, they're just like, oh, that actually feels nice, and then they lie back and they fuck, right? And it's always like that. And it's kind of like, yes, I understand what you mean with like emasculation, but there's also for me a much sinister aspect of this, which is I think men are even less trained in being able to understand their own like lines and boundaries and like their ability to give consent. And like when a guy comes forward about being sexually assaulted, even if they're dismissed, for me that's still like a positive, because I think a lot of men have been severely sexually assaulted and they don't even conceptualize that as that. They don't even realize what actually happened to them and the effect that it had on them, because men are not encouraged to think about it like that. Like, it was a shitty experience, yeah, whatever, it was fine, I kind of wanted it anyway. And I think that's like a much bigger issue, because it's obviously not very good. So
Do we not think that women have also been socialized by so many different things? I'm not trying to make this about women, by the way, but I'm just trying to add some
we think
context
this
as
about
to
women too.
yeah, but like it's very interesting how society for so long has told women and men that intimacy is sex, right? And so a lot of people's understanding of being able to get intimacy is through like sex and sex related activities. And so I feel like there is this kind of phenomenon with women who maybe go about these sorts, engage in sexual assault basically through their socialization being told that that is intimacy and that that is what men want, like a kind of a misunderstanding of consent on their behalf as well, and it just ends up in these really problematic situations.
No, I mean, I agree.
I think we need like education starting at like a much younger age about consent on all spectrums, because consent is not just a sexual thing. We need to like teach children how to have like agency and what it means for another person to consent in any sort of activity and what boundaries are. I mean, I didn't hear the word boundaries until I was probably like 16. That's pretty silly.
Yeah.
Oh, adding on to what Pixel said, actually when Zonia was talking, like, I kind of, I disagreed with her that the real heart of the issue is the emasculation and the real issue is, like, the boundaries.
Me too.
And I understand that that is an issue, but I really don't feel like that gets at the heart of the issue. And I agree with Pixel that, like, for example, like, I know a lot of really religious women that were taught growing up that if your man wants to have sex with you, like, you do it. And there is no. And so I'm not pointing it out to be like, oh, woe is these women. Men don't experience this as well. But I'm just pointing out that there are parallels where, like, both there are groups of people in both genders that are, like, not taught boundaries. And I do think that a lot more men are not taught to say no at any point. Women are taught to say no to people because they're not good enough or because of all these other reasons. So they have some sense at some point that they are going to say no. But men are not taught this at any point by society. Like, they may decide this for themselves. They may come to this like, oh, she's not my type. Oh, she's too old. She's too, insert like sexist insult, like whatever. But like, they don't really decide for themselves outside of status or something like that they shouldn't want sex, and that even if they do have sex with like a partner that they have that they love, they don't have like their own sense of boundaries of like, okay, like when is this no longer okay?
Yeah, we can
So,
just think about like a.
Oh, I was going to clarify my position. Like, I don't think that the emasculation is the problem, but at the same time, I don't think boundaries is necessarily the problem either. I think it's sort of multifaceted. Like in this case, the young man was sexually assaulted when he was passed out. And that was like the main sexual assault, right? He was completely passed out and vulnerable and then was sexually assaulted. So I think that even if we were to solve the boundaries problem and have sex education, you're still going to have sexual assaults perpetrated by some people. Some people will have a predatory approach, and some people will have more of an ignorant approach, right? So boundaries can't just be the issue. And the reason why I was talking about the emasculation is I talk about that as sort of a preventative or a barrier to a lot of men and masculine people coming forward about their sexual assaults, as well as sort of addressing the issues of sexual assault. And like the Me Too movement has included some men in it, and I think that's a really good thing. And even though more often than not it's feminine people being sexually assaulted, I think that a lot of this issue gets swept under the rug and overlooked more so than it does for women with men because of these barriers, these social barriers based around, uh, you know, being seen as being weak, being seen as being feminine or not masculine enough, etc. And that
See, but
was
I think, and I don't want
why I
to
brought
speak
that
for
up.
Lana, so I'll speak for myself. Maybe I'm being like kind of triggered because when we do like this comparison, we're like coming out about sexual assault or like men discussing the topic, it's them like expressing a type of femininity. I guess I take like personal offense to that, and maybe that's like
And I
just an
agree
I
with
mean,
you,
emotional
I
by the
think what
way.
you're
reaction
saying
I
is
have
that
to
it's
And I
bad
totally
that
agree
that's
with
the
you,
case,
by
though.
the way.
No, I
Yes.
have no doubt that it's bad, right? I'm just like owning up to maybe how my
Yeah.
opinion is more like emotional than anything else. But I again, and this is why I said that I agreed with Lana about it not being the main issue. I think that sure, the treatment of men after they come out with sexual assault allegations, or just talking about, hey, my girlfriend made me uncomfortable last night. Sure, they'll be called like a pussy. It's like, just fuck your girlfriend. It's fine. Like, what's wrong with you? And I agree, that's a huge problem.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm just repeating myself. I think men are like, I am blessed that I have men in my life who have come to me and talked to me about the sexual assaults that they have been through. And I was very surprised that they were capable of like understanding that that's what happened, because I've talked to a lot of men that told me a lot of very disturbing situations that they couldn't even label as what they were, that they didn't even understand that what they went through was a negative experience. And I get that there's kind of like an issue labeling other people's experiences as negative, but from the story I heard, clearly there was discomfort. Clearly there was like a lack of ability to establish like a boundary. And I think that's what maybe some of us are talking about when we're saying boundary and consent are the issue. But I agree, Zania, it's multifaceted. Everything is, right?
So
Can
I
I
want to hear
ask
from
like
April,
a difficult question?
and then also Zealous, because I think we've solved the issue. So April first.
Okay, I want to ask like a difficult question to the panel, and that's how this intersects with relationships and how boundaries change if you're in a relationship. Like, I think the example given earlier was if you're in a relationship and like you grab your partner's butt or whatever, is that going to be considered different than if you grab someone on like the street's butt? Obviously. And so, how do you think that these, these kind of established norms can change what is considered or not considered sexual assault?
I think you have to understand that in relationships, you're going to get it wrong sometimes, right? Because that's what boundaries are. They're not just something that you set hard and fast and then it's done, right? Like occasionally in a relationship, there is a very good chance if you're with somebody for a decent amount of time, you're absolutely going to cross a boundary. And you're going to have to be able to talk about those things. And I think in this particular situation, that's where it kind of gets a little bit interesting. Because I just can't even imagine being a teenager and trying to navigate these things, and then especially navigating them in front of a public audience, right? Because teenagers are going to get so much shit wrong. Like, I absolutely got shit wrong as a teenager. I'm sure we all have. And I would like to think that I had always respected people's consent, but I am sure that there are times when I like would have gone in for a cuddle with an ex-boyfriend and he would have been like, I'm not in the mood. And I would have been like, ah, because like for me as a woman, I would have been like, okay, well, you don't love me anymore. Like at that age, right? And it's a really uncomfortable thing to kind of talk about and navigate because you're going to get it wrong. So I do think that there is a line there. I just don't know where it is.
I was literally going to give that example before Zonia like clarified her position earlier. That's like how many of us were like trying to start something up with like a guy or a boyfriend or whatever, and then they weren't in the mood or they're sad, and then kind of like hurts your ego a little bit, and it's like it shows the entitlement that we have as well. That it's like it's expected that the guy needs to be up for it at any time, even if they're a partner. But I completely agree with you, Pixel, that there's when I sexually engage with people, it's not necessarily relationships, but if it's someone that I do things with over a period of time, guys at these spaces, at least they say very correct things. So they're like, tell me, I never want to make you uncomfortable, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, look, I have a very complex trauma history. Sometimes we'll be doing stuff and I will feel uncomfortable. I can't promise you that that won't happen. I literally can't manufacture it. All I want to know is that we have the ground that when that happens, we can like repair that. So it's not about like stopping discomfort and making sure it never happens and never crossing boundaries. Boundaries would get crossed. Boundaries are malleable. Boundaries change in the situation. It's about like having the foundation with this person to be able to discuss it. So in the same way that you can be with a partner and usually they grab your ass and everything's fine. Like there was a period of time when I was with my ex when I was just like, hey, I know we've been doing this till now, but it's like, I don't want you to touch my ass anymore. Like, I don't feel like it anymore, and maybe in the future it changed. And that's like reestablishing boundaries. But I do like about the specific case that was the prompt. I think that in that situation, and this might be the hot take, I think she was very confused about what they actually were. So I don't want to excuse the negative behavior, and I don't think it was okay. I just read her statement and I found it reasonable. I think you can absolutely infringe and hurt someone without intending to. And that was kind of like the difference when Zonia said, like, the difference between ignorant and like abusive predatory behavior. I can't necessarily label her as predatory, but I don't think you need to be predatory to do a lot of damage to another individual. And there's also the aspect of like him being unconscious. And like instead of that, maybe let's just like ask ourselves, like, when you're in a relationship, did you ever ask your partner if you can like touch their dick when they're asleep and see how they feel about it? Or is that something that we just do because we think it would be okay? I
mean,
think
I
a lot
think
of women do that.
the
That-
important thing is like negotiating these boundaries in an environment that's very like low heated, right? Because like if you're having sex with someone, sometimes you can like push the boundaries a lot with that person in the moment, just because it's
Yes.
very difficult to like say no in the moment. And I've personally been in cases, in scenarios where I've like said no, I don't want to do something, and then it's come to like we're actually having sex and they ask again, and I have a hard time saying no in that case. So I think when it comes to like negotiating these, so much of it is like making sure that you're negotiating them in a place where they feel really comfortable saying no. And when it comes to like touching someone while they're sleeping, that's like really sketchy, because obviously like they can't really stop you if they decide that that's like not comfortable, something they're comfortable with that particular time. So I think that kind of thing is something that if your partner is going to allow or not allow you to do that, you have to really be very cautious when you are negotiating that. And it seems like a particularly easy case to get things wrong and to cross boundaries that shouldn't be crossed.
I want to let
Yeah.
Zealous in. I hadn't had a chance to speak at all. Zealous, I said really nice things about you before, but I'm really glad you're here. I'm glad you're able to join us. So Zealous, please tell us your initial thoughts.
So my initial thoughts on the allegations and everything. So from what I could read, to me it seemed like Jack made continuous efforts to set boundaries that were broken, and I would wanted to say that you don't feel like it's predatory because, the boundaries in a relationship and things of that nature can be so nuanced. But I think in this case specifically, there were boundaries that were set, and he let her know that she had made him uncomfortable and that she was doing things that weren't okay, and she didn't stop. And so I feel like
Would you like me to clarify? We can't hear you very well right now.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're talking.
oh, you can't hear me?
Now we
No.
can hear you.
Yeah.
You've cutting
Try it
out.
again. Yeah, you might have been cutting out a little bit, but keep going.
No, so I was just saying that sexual boundaries in a relationship, if there hasn't been like a conversation that has happened, it's kind of like something you kind of play by ear in a sense, like you don't want you're not purposefully like generally not to the specifics of the prompt and the situation itself, but in general, boundaries and things like that, if there hasn't been a direct conversation, it's kind of nuanced and it kind of you play it as you go. But in the context of this, I feel that there were boundaries that were set that were purposefully broken, and in my opinion, she was acting predatory. And I think she was taking advantage of the fact that he is a man and there are like societal expectations of men to always be in the mood or always like not like to not want to turn down sex, especially if they have a prior sexual relationship, which I think is wrong. So that's
So,
essentially what to say.
when I would talk about predatory, not predatory, the only thing I mean by that is if the person is intending and are very much are purposefully un purposefully callous of the other person's needs, or like they're actively ignoring them. And maybe that's a silly
I'll
interpretation.
fucking hard disagree with this. I'm sorry,
Then,
I can't.
then let's talk
No,
about it.
no, that I can't. I can't get behind that at all.
Let's
I
talk about it.
honestly think that like intent basically doesn't matter. Like
I agree with you that intent doesn't matter. That's why the word predatory is stupid to use. I just find it completely useless. I think when we try to label someone as like, oh, I get using words like predatory and abusive and stuff like that to conceptualize your own experience and what you've been through. That's fine. But because I think intent doesn't matter, I think someone can hurt you severely and meaningfully and never intending to do that. And that was kind of going to be my argument, that I think for her, and I can't speak for her again because I'm not in her brain, but I think her case is a good example to how women are so socialized to not even consider that the guy, like, we understand that even if you have an explicit conversation about something, if you feel like the dynamic changes in the moment, like playing it by ear, you might recontextualize that conversation. And I don't know if that's what happened with them, but it's like a broader topic of women are not realizing, or we're not taught in any way, that there's another party that might have needs and boundaries that they need to pay attention to. Because in the media and right now with like feminist movements, we're talking about listen to yourself, understand your boundaries, give consent. But it's like it's two people and the guy needs to be able, guy or girl, whatever, they need to be able to do that too. So in the same way that men are expected or are educated today to be attentive to the woman and make sure that she's okay and enthusiastic consent and all that crap, it needs to go the other way around. And I think women are very bad at realizing that they're not paying enough attention to what's going on with the guy as well. And that's why I said at the beginning, it's also really hard to do because guys are not attentive to themselves even more than women. So like you'll ask him, hey, are you okay? And they'll say yes, no matter what. Like they're not even asking themselves that, right? So it's a problem. It's a real problem. But we can talk about predatory if you want.
Yeah, the way in which like being predatory versus being ignorant matters is stopping that further abuse. And regardless of what it is, regardless of the intent, it is abuse. It is abuse. It is sexual assault. The damage on the person is going to be the same whether or not they're ignorant or they're being predatory. But if somebody is ignorant,
100%.
I personally would not give this individual the benefit of that doubt, and I know that might be stepping too far into facts that I don't have like concretely, but oh man, I lost my train of thought.
She's predatory.
Yeah, I mean, I think she's predatory, but if she is ignorant, I mean, she's truly ignorant, or maybe she's just like almost like in the middle, like almost willfully ignorant, that's a possibility as well. She could be educated, and that's important to note. But other than that,
so,
like
Pixel and Zonia brought this up at the beginning. Like the internet is really weird, and this might be a me thing. I have very little interest with online stuff, so relationships that I have no actual like personal experience with. I don't care about the intention of a person. I care about the harm that was done to a different person. I care about the person who went through something negative, that has been traumatized or hurt or abused or being predated against, but I have zero interest in labeling that other person anything, because I can't talk about their state of mind. I can say, you hurt this individual but I don't give a fuck why. It doesn't really matter to me. I can't take you to court for it. I'm not going to put you in jail. I might have my own personal opinions about what you did, but I think, like, I don't think realizing if she's just ignorant or predatory is the issue. I think whether she's predatory or ignorant, she did things that really hurt this guy, either because she was confused or because she didn't give a fuck. But it's like, I can't, like, I'm not her mom. I can't go and lecture her for being a callous bitch, right? So I more have an interest in, like, finding out why people have those situations. How can women end up really hurting men without even realizing it? Because I think we all agree that women hurt men sexually all the time, and most of them are not predatory. Or is that a hot take?
I don't think that's a
Well,
hot take.
I mean, I think
I
that's
think
true, like,
I think
in general, yeah.
I know for me, the only reason why I intentionally brought up the difference between a predatory act versus one out of ignorance is mainly to address the boundaries thing, and that if we lean too hard on, oh, we need to be doing more to teach young people how to establish boundaries, even though I think that's a good thing, I don't think it solves the problem every time, right? Because you can have
Doesn't.
someone who, you can have both a combination of being negligent of boundaries as well as someone being predatory who doesn't even care about boundaries. And that's the only time that I really felt that it mattered to define the difference. I think in what we're talking about here, we would talk more about sort of a holistic approach to how do we address these kinds of issues. You have, in the case of Jack, his perspective from what he was saying is that he was continuously establishing boundaries, and like more and more so as their friendship went on, and those boundaries were not being respected by his friend Sienna, right? And so if his friend isn't respecting those boundaries, then boundaries are not the answer there. So
Yeah.
something else needs to be the case. And I think kind of like what you're hitting on, Katie, is sort of this, in a way, being socialized to not take men's boundaries as seriously as men are socialized to, well, trying to be socialized to take women's. But there's definitely more emphasis coming from that direction than the other right now.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I have a question for the panel. Oh, no, go Zealous.
Okay. All I wanted to say was that I understand why you would want to say that intent doesn't really matter, because the effects of what happened are still there. Like, the person was still hurt. But I do think that intent is always important when we're looking at things in general, because like that's how we handle things in the justice system. Um like intent is a part of how we sentence, so I do think intent is important. And you don't have to be in someone's head to be able to recognize intent. I think you can just look at the details and be able to recognize, like, and what's the word, kind of like speculate about, like, what the person's intent was. Because in the context of this, I feel that the fact that there were boundaries placed that were deliberately ignored, that speaks to intent. And that's why I think, like, if you accidentally violate somebody's boundaries, it's not the same as when you intentfully violate somebody's boundaries. And I feel like
And how
that is something.
do you distinguish that between accidentally and deliberately? In
Well,
her situation,
there are
like specific.
boundaries. No, hold on. In her situation, I'll answer that. In her situation, you can't accidentally violate somebody's boundaries when they have time and time again reiterated their boundaries and try to reestablish them multiple times over, and you continue to disregard them. So, like, in that, you would say, like, you can speculate that her intent was not to respect his boundaries, and it was to, like she intentfully disregarded them. Because it's one thing to have a boundary set once or maybe even twice, but if it's continuous, then it speaks to how you don't care about their boundaries and you're purposefully violating them.
So I agree with you that intent is important and the justice system works this way. My main argument was that I'm not the justice system, especially not with online relationships that I know very little about. And maybe what you're saying, all of that is true. The thing is, it doesn't matter to me personally in the sense that I I can't be in someone's head. My entire argument is that it's very possible. So I could have an explicit conversation with someone that I tell them, please don't text me on Tuesday. But we also have a friendship and they have a personal crisis on Tuesday and they hit me up on Tuesday and they're like, oh my God, I really need you. So at that moment, they are crossing a boundary. Are they intentfully crossing a boundary? Is it a problem if they do in that situation? I mean, we can deliberate all of that. I'm just saying, I don't mind other people seeking out intent. I have little like personal interest in that because to distinguish between being even willfully ignorant and maliciously predating on someone, there's a massive difference, and I can't be in someone's head to make that difference. So I don't care about labeling that as much. And I'm going to tell you why I think it's not as important to me. Most people aren't predators. Everyone can engage in predatory behavior for sure, but I think most people don't set out to harm other people. I think it's way more likely that someone is just ignorant about social cues, willfully ignorant because they want to fuck someone, so they're being more pushy than they should be. All of these things, then they're actively seeking out to harm the person that they're engaging with. So from that mindset, I don't really, I assume I have, what's it called? Like goodwill, as in like, Harvey Weinstein is a great example to how I have no problem with understanding that there was intent, okay? Or you can make that argument that you can't know what he was thinking and maybe he didn't really understand what was wrong with his actions. And I would argue that at some point with such repetitive behavior and such, it doesn't really matter at that point because the harm is so severe and so magnified. I don't think it matters too much.
So Zealous, you can respond. Then I want to hear from Pixel, who had a question for the panel. Yeah.
So I totally understand what you're saying. For me, I just think that I feel like if the genders were reversed, there wouldn't be, I don't know, like feel like space to like want to do without the intent or act as if like
And I think that's bad.
Yeah, there should be.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
I think the
so
question is like, no, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
no,
finish
go
your
ahead.
point,
No, go
Zealous.
ahead. Well, no, I just wanted to say that like I feel like the reason there's so much wiggle room in this and like you don't want to assume, I feel like you would be quicker to assume if the genders were reversed.
No, my argument is that I wouldn't. I do the same with guys, right? So I think a lot of people on this panel would be a lot quicker to assume, which I don't think you were here for my opening statement. But I think we do that with men as well. And when I talk to women and we talk about like experiences they have, I've talked to Shay extensively about my own sexual experiences. And she was like, well, you were definitely infringed upon, like your boundaries were definitely being crossed, like this doesn't sound consensual and stuff like that. And I go, yeah, it was a tough experience for me. I have very little interest in now trying to figure out if this person actually tried to hurt me or they were just kind of dumb or callous or whatever. It's just not really important to me.
I think the thing
let's
is that like,
let's try Pixel, and then
So my question is actually kind of relevant to all of this. I wanted to ask the panel how we feel about this playing out in the public sphere with these kids who were minors at the time, in the way it is. Because I don't know about all of you, but my experiences as a young woman, men got it wrong all the time. right? And there were definitely times when like my boundaries were certainly crossed, and there's probably times when I crossed certain boundaries. But now, as I'm a little bit older, I can't imagine what that would have been like, especially having like viral people commenting on these sorts of experiences. So I'm just actually really curious as to how everybody feels about this playing out in the public sphere, right? Having had this experience be when these people were very, very young.
I mean, we're all here, we're all on Twitch, right? So I think everyone has some experience with being in the public sphere, just a little bit. And I think that with that experience comes like the universal experience of being like misunderstood, and or people just like reading things into your personal life that are totally non-existent. And so I think sometimes when we start talking about intention and trying to get into people's heads and understand like how good or bad of a person, this person is based on outside knowledge, I think that's just like, it's so dangerous and it's so disastrous. And I think we see it like all the time with like much less clear-cut cases. Not to say this case is totally clear-cut, because again, we are still on the outside. But with especially more ambiguous things, people will just read in whatever they want to believe. If they want to hate the person, they'll find a reason to hate them. And I think that the question of like intent and whether or not someone's a predator, that's the kind of thing that like is good for the justice system. The justice system needs to figure that out so they can like figure out what needs to happen to a person. But from the outside, I think our responsibility is really to use cases like this to have conversations about, consent in general and consent in society, and maybe worry a little bit less about like the specific drama of this case and trying to really get into the specific head of this person, because that's just so difficult to do.
I think a personal, yeah.
On a personal level, I will almost always like automatically read into these things.
It's very
like,
easy to do.
The tone of her apology statement. Yeah, that definitely like gave me some hints as to her character, the tone with which things were said between the two of them. But you do bring up a good point about maybe that's not great to share publicly, because it does contribute, especially if you've got like a following. That definitely does contribute to a lot of like mob justice type mentalities.
A personal frustration that I have with online is that I guess it's content, or I guess it's just like human nature clicking with whatever the internet is. It's a lot more interesting to try to figure this person out and listen to the tone of their apology and try to understand what they did and what they didn't do. I watched this really interesting video. I'll see if I can find it and link it. It talked about how like a woman in Australia was literally convicted for murdering her own baby, because public opinion, basically, when she was on the steps like 6 months later and talking about her baby, she was slightly apathetic. So the public turned on her and they thought that's not how a grieving mother looks. So she got convicted for murdering her own child. It's the dingo ate my baby meme. That's a real story. It was her baby. So it's kind of like, me personally, I don't think I need to figure out how intentful and how predatory and how incredibly bad this girl was to care a lot about the experience this guy went through. And I think there's a lot more good to be had there. But I think it's just internet nature that I'm never going to understand. So maybe that's just like a personal defect of mine.
This is like I feel like we're getting like off topic, but do you not find it helpful in your personal life? Because human beings, like the advantage we have over computers is we're very good at pattern recognition. That's what we do. Do you not find it like helpful in your personal life?
No, we're not good
in
at
my
it.
personal life. Yeah, for sure. Like if I want to find out the intention of someone that I know personally, in regards to a situation that I know happened personally, I think that I'm like really equipped to do that. It's only when it gets to like people who I have no like conception of who they are as a person, right? I haven't consumed these people's content until today. And even if I did, that's a very one-sided relationship. So I think that like trying to figure out people who you don't know is really when it gets dangerous. And we're very good at figuring out stuff in our own life. Hopefully, even then, like we can get things wrong. And it's an entirely different ballgame when it comes to people on the internet. Which is why I think it's like a little bit dangerous to try to speculate about intention of this specific person or not. But in general, I would say personally that intention does matter when it comes to trying to understand like whether or not a specific person is predatory. And that's, like we said, important for the justice system to figure out and so on.
In terms of me, Cyrus, personally, in my personal life, I'm not like April. I do have a hard time maybe realizing when someone is hurting me in a way that isn't excusable. I'm not that good at it. So what I do is I think, how does interacting with this person feels? How many times do I end up feeling sad or hurt? How much I've communicated what I need and what I want, and has there been improvement? And if there hasn't, I don't think this person doesn't care about me, or this person is an abuser, or they have narcissism, or whatever. I just think something here isn't clicking, and I just need to remove myself, because maybe it's me, maybe it's them, but this is not good for me. So I don't need to assign blame to anyone else to realize that a dynamic isn't good for me. Now, that would be very different in like extremely abusive relationships, because your ability to like gather yourself and walk away is like incredibly hindered. But I think the internet has primed a lot of people to think that a lot of their relationships is a lot more abusive than what they actually are. And it's just called human relations being complex. And sometimes things are going to happen that you're not going to like, and that's going to suck.
I haven't read this book yet. I need to. It's called Conflict is Not Abuse. And it's all about
Sounds
that.
like a good title.
I've been screaming about this stuff to myself, alone, to my computer, for years, about how people are just taking these words, abuse and narcissism and whatever else, and abusing the hell out of them, ironically.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting watching these things play out online, and kind of, Katie, what you said before, how you can't actually understand the internet, you can. And because I know that there are people on this panel who have had experience with this as well, where very much on the internet, people are going to virtue signal. Whatever the situation is, whoever is experiencing the canceling or whatever, people will jump on it if they feel like they are on the right side of the conversation with the information that they have. Whether the victim is a woman or a man, most of the time, the majority of the internet will be jumping on the side of the optics of what makes them look like a good person for supporting that. So that's where so much of the nuance gets lost in these online conversations, because people are engaging them in them with their own intention about how they will be perceived for either supporting this person or denouncing this person.
Yeah.
So you can understand people's intentions.
I think what I meant by I don't understand the internet, I think I understand what happens pretty well and why people do it. When I said I don't understand it, I mean, I don't think I get a kick out of it like other people seem to. Because I don't think random mobs on Twitter are like fucking Bosch or Destiny with like huge crowds following them, right? So I think, and I always look at things from like a psychological perspective, and it's just how I look at things. I think people are when things like this come up in the online sphere, you're now faced with a situation, and you're going to project all of your experiences onto it. And a lot of people have been hurt, and a lot of people have been abused, and a lot of people have grievances with personal people in their lives, and they can't solve that. So if there's a situation that they can like project that onto and like lay into this imaginary abusive person instead of like figuring out their own shit with their own abusive person, then that's a lot easier. And I'm not saying it's necessarily like a bad thing. I just have no interest in it personally.
I want to, Cyrus, I think you want to talk. And there's some people who haven't had much chance to jump in. Shay, Lana, want to make sure you guys have a space.
Oh,
Okay.
it was just like regarding what Pixel Smixel was saying about the way that people want a virtue signal, and it's specifically that they want a virtue signal to their in-group, to the people that they follow, the people that they know they already mostly agree with. That's kind of what they're looking for. I think it's a combination though, as well, of like people having real emotional issues, and those are probably like the loudest people, is the virtue signalers and the people with real trauma or issues that they're projecting onto this situation.
Shay, do you have anything to add? Then Lana.
Yeah, I think a lot of this really, because especially going to the question to the panel, kind of like how it affects you when you're so young, I think it actually really starts so young. And a lot of us have kind of talked about that, how as young boys, they're sort of not only taught, but incentivized, really, to sort of not really create those boundaries. And I think it's done in a couple different ways. Like, there was a quote that I heard a while, and I can't remember where I heard it from, but they said that as a society, we see that sex is something that is done to women, not something that women do. And I think that's a really interesting concept, really. And then it compounds on other issues like certain myths, I guess, like that I would assume, I guess, are myths where men are horny 24/7 and it's your job to say no. Like, I'm sure a lot of women...
Not all men.
Oh, yeah. Every single one of them, obviously. No.
It's okay if you're depressed.
No, and I think we really see how this plays out differently because just a couple days ago, I saw a video from D'Angelo Wallace. He was doing a sort of like just an analysis of Shallon Lester, who is a woman who pretty much, she literally says, yeah, oh God, I'm a predator. She says her vice is younger men. I think there's an actual text where she's commenting and saying she has to wait until she has to wait a year for someone to turn 18. And you compare someone like that who still hasn't really been deplatformed all that much to someone like Onision, you know what I mean? A lot, and you could still argue that he might have a fan base, but there's an entire documentary, going over how his behavior was problematic. And I also think it's really interesting because when you consider it, the media I've consumed, at least outside of like Law and Order, very rarely shows men being sexually abused. And I think that's such an interesting concept, kind of adding to, we are taught this. And as we grow up, if we aren't really educated, which is why I do not to bring it back to boundaries, but that's sort of why I feel like it is important, because I feel like a lot of people out here, even Sienna, might not have recognized within herself that the fact that he said no meant no because, well, he's a man. They want it all the time. And that's not to say her frame of reference or to even say that that's okay. But, and even like that goes to what Katie said as well. I doubt he even might have recognized in that moment, like, I'm being assaulted and I need to find someone to help me. You know what I mean? Like,
also, I want to like say that like the only times you do hear about men being sexually assaulted in a way that isn't made for laughs or dismissal is when you talk about children. You never hear about adult men talking about their adult experiences where women have violated their consent, or not very often at all, and that's a huge problem. It's really bad.
Even with teenage boys, right, and older teenage boys, it's equally downplayed or just completely ignored.
It's a story, and I want to go to Lana next after this. It's a story I brought up. Actually, might have been on a past Lily. But where I was in college, and there was this woman, I guess, that I would hang out with. She was cool. She was in the anime. Loved it, you know. And we lived on a co-ed dorm. And you know, so yeah, I just had to walk down the hallway, and that's where she was at. So yeah, I go over to her spot, and I'm sitting on her bed, and we're just talking about something, all right, something random. And this woman literally jumps me. She jumps me. She like grabs onto me and starts like kissing all over me, right? And I don't know what to do. And like we like fall to the floor, and I'm just like laughing because I don't know what's happening, and I don't know how to react to it. And I get up, or at least I try to get up because this woman is freaking strong. She's got a hold on me, right? And I try to like drag myself, like, hey, you know what? Like, I'm not sure if I even vocalized anything to her. I think I was just laughing, as the whole thing happened, and eventually I got free and I ran away, laughing about it the whole time. But you know, just play it back, with the gender switched, and like from some, like it becomes like a funny story to like really disturbing. And I don't know. I don't conceptualize it as like I was assaulted, you know, or anything like that. You know,
I
which I
think
thought
the
was
way you
interesting.
delivered
What
it.
Katie, I
No,
was gonna say, I think it was interesting the way you said earlier, Katie. You know, about like not putting like a negative spin on someone else's story, right? Because I mean, I think if like by the books, like it's kind of like an assault there. But to me, it was just a weird thing that happened. It's just I moved on. But
yeah,
yeah.
I think the way you tell it is very like revealing, right? Because when you said I couldn't even get up because she was so strong and you're laughing right now, I giggled and then I looked at everyone else and everyone else were being very serious. And I think like even the delivery of that story is like meant to play it off. And it creates like this atmosphere that like people around you hearing to this story need to understand that it's not a big deal, it's not an issue. And I think it was like a live example to that. But like Prime, we talked about my experiences. Like a lot of people like to label my experiences as like abusive or rape or whatever, and I don't conceptualize them that way.
Mhm.
I think like this is kind of like a tangent, but it's something that's important for me to say. I think anyone can label their experiences whatever they find helpful. I think it's incredibly problematic to label other people's experiences as negative, especially when they come with like the oomph of what it would mean to like reconcile with yourself that you were sexually assaulted and violated that way. But I do think I would hope that you would have the space, like in the future, if you wanted to like re-examine that that experience. I'm not saying like get traumatized by it, but maybe in 5 years from now, you'll be able to look in that story, and next time you tell it would be like, so this thing happened to me, and it was not okay, and I hope no guy has to go through that. I was so uncomfortable. I was just laughing the entire time, and I think that would show progress in the world, not in you.
I don't know. I think we
Wow.
have to be really careful because, like, I have also been in experiences where in the moment, like, I wasn't really terribly upset about them. But looking back, like, they very obviously fall into like a technical definition of assault. And
Yeah.
I think that, like, sometimes people can analyze, they can look back at their experiences, and that can be a really healthy process that allows them to heal and to grow and to come to better understandings about what kind of behavior is and isn't appropriate. But I also worry that sometimes people can like cause themselves to feel pain that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise. And like in my personal experiences, and I can't speak to what Prime has experienced, but like I think that there are people who have told me like that's really bad. Like you should be like very upset about this. And like they just didn't really upset me in the moment, and I'm not like traumatized afterwards. And I refuse to like traumatize myself looking back or like characterize myself as a victim in this case because I think that like a lot of these circumstances are just like so complicated. And even if something is like technically it technically might like be considered assault. If you personally are not like suffering as a result of that, I think it's okay to like allow yourself to not be like horribly bothered, and to not like
I'd like to challenge
re-traumatize
you.
yourself. Yeah, please.
Okay. So first of all, I agree with you, and that was you said what I said basically. I don't think people should traumatize or re-traumatize themselves just so society would be fine with the label they put on an experience they have. I think that's really crappy. I think people can hear Prime's case and be like, that's a great like example of assault without needing Prime to break down in tears and cry about an experience, right? Both things can exist at the same time. What I talked to Shay about this like a few weeks ago, and she said something similar to what you said. So I want to ask you what I asked her. So if women very consistently infringe on boundaries with guys, not in relationships, just like in the world, women are much more okay to like put hands on and stuff like that. Stuff that we would tell guys, hey, don't fuck a waste of don't touch the waist of a woman you don't know without like making sure it's okay. You can't just put hands on. And I know that like I touch men all the time. It's because it's more socialized that it will be okay and they'll be okay with it. So if someone infringed on your boundaries, if there was a violation of consent or implied consent, but it didn't bother you, what does that mean? Does that approve what happened?
I would say, like, in that circumstance, no harm is done. And that doesn't necessarily mean that, as a
I
rule,
disagree.
that kind of behavior is good or acceptable. So I think we can, like, sometimes actions won't have a particular harm come of them just because of the circumstances in which they happen. But that doesn't necessarily mean the action itself is something that people are okay to push the boundaries with, just because they can be like so bad when they do go bad. So like I'm thinking about my personal experiences, and when I've like told people like, no, I don't want to do this, and we've ended up, doing that anyways. In my case, like I don't feel particularly traumatized, but I would never tell anyone that like, yeah, it's okay that to like sometimes have sex with someone, even if they say no, just because like I personally wasn't particularly bothered by it in one specific case. I think that would be like incredibly dangerous to do. So I think that I would say in my case, like harm didn't happen, but the action itself is something that we should be like very quick to point out as like something that you should not engage in, because so often harm does come of that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
think
was gonna say that.
I do want to hear from Lana. I haven't got a chance to throw it to her, but then after that, everyone else, please.
So I think it's really interesting. So I feel like I've experienced a lot of different things that on different levels I would or wouldn't consider like sexual assault, and other people might like disagree
Holy
with like
fuck, I
what
can't believe
it
I lived
technically
there.
was or whatever. And like some of the experiences, like for me, it's like, was it traumatizing? Like, not was it technically sexual assault, right? And not everything that's actually sexual assault is traumatizing. And like, but that like you can't tell people like, hey, like you can do things that are technically sexual assault, and like people are gonna be okay with it, because it's just like not helpful. Because some people can't read cues, or like aren't actually in relationships where they like know the person really well, and they talk about those things and they go through it. And for me, right, so getting back I guess a little bit to the specific situation, I know Kate, you didn't really want to comment on this specifically, but I think it's really odd. So like I didn't read too much about the situation, I don't know too much about it. I like read the article a little bit, but from my understanding about what Zonia said is that like he was asleep, like he was unconscious. And like to me, there are certain things that are just way past the line that like those should basically never be okay unless you talk about them first. And to me, if a man did that on Twitch, we would all instantly call him a rapist, right? Like I think that's pretty like black and white, to be honest. But I understand like
wouldn't.
fair enough, but But I think for a lot of people, that would be pretty black and white. So I did want to point out that although I understand like you may hold that standard that for anyone like online, you basically don't want to comment on like basically like labeling people or you know doing that. But I do want to point out that I feel that if it were a man in this situation, it would be a little bit easier of a judgment for a lot of people, not necessarily you. And I also want to point out that while I think these situations are like really complex and like, you know, consent is very like different between people, to be completely honest, I've like read a lot about like different theories of consent and like how to like apply them, and everyone has like a different preference. Like some people are like really into enthusiastic consent, some people are into like the concept of like respecting the person and kind of like knowing them and like going with what you think that they would want. Some people want like, you know, only if there's a no. Some people want you have to have a yes. And those are like, they look completely different, right? So it's really hard. But I do want to point out that like the gender thing to me feels like it for a lot of people they would feel differently about this situation, like if
The reason why I feel comfortable saying what I am saying about this specific case is because I haven't watched the video, and maybe the video will change my mind, but I watched Jack's video of talking about the allegations, and I read not the shitty apology video that she made like when it first came out, but a statement that she released like a few weeks ago. And from what I read, because I looked a little bit into it, her perspective, and people could say that she's lying, and I have no way of proving that she isn't, and I'm not going to die on that hill, so I don't give a fuck. But if I choose to not assume that she's lying, it seems that this girl was incredibly confused about the status of their
why
relationship.
would you listen to her? Like if somebody gets assaulted, like why would you automatically like listen to the rapist, like, or the person being accused? Like that never occurs to me ever. Like usually in my experience, right, when someone like is accusing someone else of sexual assault, my first thing is, okay, this person was hurt. You know, like validate their feelings and like give them comfort and like make them feel better. And like if for some reason you have to prove it, right, like because you're going to court or because you know there's some sort of consequence you're trying to give the person who's been like perpetrated against, right, like you basically collect evidence to understand like did this reasonably happen, like what were the other things. And like honestly, like I didn't read all the information, but like in my experience, like if there's something sexual that happens between two people, and this is totally an anecdote and like from my own like personal assault experiences, when two people have some sort of like sexual experience and it doesn't go well, if they actually care about that other person, they'll kind of like apologize, like try to fix it, move on, right? But like what actually like in my experience, like I had an interaction with someone I was dating a long time ago, and it was like vaguely non-consensual, and I like brought it up. I was very upset about it, and he like apologized, and like he actually made me feel like he regretted it, right? Like I knew that it was like actually an accident, and I felt better about it, and like I would never consider that assault. Because like I know that like.
So don't you think that if she were to talk to him and if he were to accept her version, that when she infringed on his boundaries, she did not understand his boundaries to be what they were, and she was confused about the status of their relationship, don't you think that would recontextualize the experience for them? I'm not saying that's what happened. I'm saying I read her statement, and I don't think I would read a rapist statement. If they raped someone, their statement is not going to change what they did. I'm not worried about listening to guilty people's like their pleads, because at the end of the day, if they did something that is objectively bad and they are 100% in the wrong, then it will be clear no matter how they spin it, unless they're lying, right? But the thing is, most relationships, it's not going to be only one person did a thing that was horribly bad. And that's why I read her statement, because it mattered to me what led this person to do these things, because from what he was talking about, it was extremely clear he was very disinterested. And from her statement, it seems like that she was very much confused about the status of their relationships and how he feels about her, which makes me understand how she could be very unclear on boundaries,
That
even though
doesn't
they were
justify
properly.
anything while you're asleep, though. Like from my
No, that doesn't
understanding,
justify it.
what
That doesn't
like
justify it.
that's like a hard line. Like I don't know about anyone else. I feel like that's kind of a hard line.
I'm sorry. I'm not saying that justifies it. The whole Jack thing, he elaborated a lot more things than just him being unconscious. There are more videos, there are more instances. He talked about her topping him naked in the middle when they were just hanging out. There's a whole story there. I don't know how much you read.
So-
it's a saga that lasts like a year.
I-
It's a lot more complex.
I think we're burying the
And
lead,
there's
though.
also-
But like, we're burying the lead, and I want to hear from you as well, Zonia. But like, Lana, you said like, why would you never listen to the person who was assaulted, or sorry, did the supposedly did the assaulting, right? But that's what we do within, like, for instance, the justice system, right? But even just when we're trying to figure out as third-party observers, to any situation, we have to like listen to the other side. Doesn't mean we necessarily believe them or anyone, right? But just we'd have to go to them and hear their side of the story, right? It could be a misunderstanding, right? Like maybe if you heard the two sides, you realize, okay, this is where things are going wrong. But to say that you're not going to listen at all, like that seems like a problem, right?
I agree with that.
Do it at all, but I don't know. Maybe I'm misinterpreting like how much Kate read on both sides.
I have, but I want to clarify. and
Read
then Zonia, I'll let
everything.
you
I mean,
talk.
if you
I'm so
can.
sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be very quick. We have very little time. I mean, I want to hear from other people.
The unconscious thing is 100% not okay. I have zero justification for that. The only reason why that's not my main focus is because I'm thinking if she thought they were basically a couple, the amount of girls who have touched their boyfriends when they're asleep because they thought their boyfriend was okay with it is astounding. And I think that there needs to be a conversation about that if I'm going to now call that sexual assault when she thinks they're in a relationship. That's
Zonia.
all there is to it.
I know for me, what I did was I was listening not just to Jack and Sienna, but also to the friends of like their friend group. And so there were videos posted by multiple friends. There's one in particular who had witnessed multiple incidents and talked about them in a video, and they were there for the sexual assault while Jack was asleep. And yeah, it's definitely there's a lot to it. It's very complicated. From everything that I kind of heard, it sounded to me like most of the friends in the group confirm that Jack was trying to establish boundaries, and that those boundaries either weren't being picked up by Sienna or were being just ignored. And so that's kind of mixed as to the boundaries. Now, the one sexual assault when Jack was passed out asleep, I think that one is pretty cut and dry, mainly because they didn't have an intimate relationship, like an existing intimate relationship. There was a close friendship that had been growing closer, and there was some playfulness initiated, from what it seems like, from Sienna, that Jack was apparently trying to establish boundaries on. So they hadn't. Usually when it comes down to a thing like you have a partner, well, I'm not the best person to speak on this, but usually when it comes down to a partner feeling comfortable touching parts of your body without your consent, that's like a well established intimate relationship over a period of time, right, where there's been so much gradual understanding of the individuals and what they're comfortable with and where those boundaries are. And you can't really apply that in the situation, as far as I can tell. Like, I just don't see the any ability for them to establish that when Jack felt like he and his friends felt like he was continually trying to set boundaries to prevent all the intimate play that Sienna seemed to be putting forward. So that's the way that I look at it after looking at all the videos and reading the statement made by Sienna and such.
Why don't
I'm
we?
being quiet to let other people talk.
It's fine. Well, it's too late because we're out of time. So we're gonna move on to our next topic. Okay. Before we do that, though, before we do that, to my audience, if you've been enjoying this content so far, well, great, fantastic. I'm really happy for you. We do this all the time. We have content like this on the channel 6 nights a week. We're always here, always here. And so, if you've been enjoying this, hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on, so you know I'm going live. We do this 6 nights a week, so don't want you to miss out on any more of that content. Exclamation point social and chat. For more of our social media, we have Twitter, where we tweet stuff, right? We have Discord, heart and soul of the community. Everything happens on Discord, right? We have offline conversations. We have online conversations like you're seeing here, right? But everything happens on Discord. We want you to be a part of that. So consider joining the Discord community. And YouTube is where you find the VODs. If you missed anything, right? If you come in late, missed anything, thought this was a really interesting topic, well, then you'll find that on YouTube. So like, comment, subscribe, and consider becoming a YouTube member. Hitting that join button, supporting the channel that way as well. Okay, thank you. So we're going to continue on to our next thing.
Wait, before you do that, hey chat, if you're enjoying this and you like what Prime is bringing, feel free, if you got the opportunity to give a few bits here and there, maybe a sub or something, because Prime puts in a lot of work for this stuff, and organizing panels and getting panels together is not an easy thing. And I also want to give a special shout out to Katie for really working hard to put this whole thing together, because again, very thankless job. So if people can give a quick shout out, if people can give a quick thank you to Katie, that'd be great.
I'll do it. Thank you, Katie. Thanks, Katie, for everything. Seriously, she was a real trooper, and this would not be here if she didn't reach out, make it happen, and then yell at me continuously. That part's important. If she didn't do that part, then we definitely wouldn't have done it. So, okay, let's go to our next topic. In the West, sex is by default looked on as harmful, even when it is done between consenting adults in private. There can be a sense that something wrong or shameful is happening. This is especially true for women. Some people say that women can't engage in sex without emotions, and if they attempt it, they are committing some level of self-harm that will eventually traumatize them. Does this sentiment hold any weight? Do most women actually require that sense of connection? If so, can women engage in sex work in a way that doesn't traumatize them? Or will that industry, in all its many forms, always just use women up until they have no value left? All right. And Cyrus, we just read the second question, so we're on that. Just so you know. Okay, we'll do opening statements. I'll start with our friend Zonia.
I'm guessing that very last sentence about used up their the value is that intentionally provocative?
I didn't know how to end it. I actually had a lot of trouble. Just to tell you, this topic wasn't necessarily my idea. Katie and I came up with it together. But I had to create the prompt, and I had a lot of trouble with this, a lot of trouble putting this together. And I was just like, the sentence that came to mind. I don't know. So there you go. There's nothing behind it.
Well, it's really funny because there's this sort of cultural sort of not understanding, but this trope that has existed for a long time, that virginity is so valuable, and the more sex that a woman is having, the less valuable she is, and crap like that. So when I saw that sentence, I was like, holy crap, this is very provocative. But I think that it is this one's a tough one for me to even speak on, because my sexual experience is very little, and I don't really know exactly what to say about it. I think that there's this. It's hard for me to speak on, but I think it's kind of silly to think that sex can only be engaged with as an emotional thing for women. And I know plenty of women who I would refer to as players, right? And are having, they have a lot of fun getting with many different men, in particular, for the straight women that I know. And I don't I don't understand why that would be harmful, or why that would have to be tethered to emotion. So in the claim about sex work somehow then being harmful to women because of women being tied sexually, having their sexuality tied to something of emotion, seems like a really kind of, I don't know, it seems like a shallow take that's based on some pretty dumb stereotypes, in my opinion. I can't speak a lot on this until other people kind of open up for me a little bit more due to my lack of sexual experience. So I'm going to let others kind of initiate this one, and I'll build off of what they say.
I mean,
Thanks so
if I
much.
can
Pixel.
jump in and just give like
No,
we're
we're
going.
just going down. Yeah,
Okay.
going around. Yeah, don't worry.
Not an open
Pixel?
discussion yet.
Pixel, please.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I've had so much sex all the time, especially during the pandemic, so I can speak on this very well, clearly. No, I just want to make it very clear that how much sex a woman has nothing to do with her value. Value and purity culture is something that has been entrenched by the patriarchy in order to oppress women and control women, and slut shaming women especially is something that is used to control women. On kind of the other areas of this specific topic, I do think that women can engage in sex and behaviors without emotional attachment, but I do think that women have been socialized to think that sex equals emotional attachment and intimacy. And I also think that men have been socialized to think that sex equals intimacy as well. And there's like issues there that we need to establish within what I would hope is a more sexually educated, free culture, as I think that is really important as we move into the future. I also think that those who engage in sex work can do so without being harmed. I think that people will engage in sex work no matter what happens. I think there are a lot of people who enjoy being perceived in that way, or the attention that they get from that way, and I don't think there is anything wrong with that. Obviously, there are lots of little bits and pieces that are difficult to navigate around that conversation specifically. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I think understanding that women can be sexual beings, and especially sexual beings as well as respected beings, like understanding that women are more than just objects, more than just property. Breaking down conversations around sex is really important to that in society. So that's probably my opening statement.
Okay, thank you. Probably. You're not sure? Are you still working on it?
I'm just doing that thing that women do where I just soften my points at the end, because otherwise, we get in trouble. I can't say anything too authoritatively or I'll get in trouble.
Okay.
You know?
All right. And the moment you put your foot down with a period, it threatens me as a man.
Exactly. It's a big issue. All right.
Cypress. Or sorry, excuse me.
Really, like, the hottest take I think I'm gonna have on this issue is that there are a lot of people in general who are unwilling to recognize that they have more of an emotional attachment when it comes to sex than some others. Some people just aren't cut out for like the casual dating, like Tinder sex culture. I guess that's what I'll call it. I'm married. I've been monogamous for quite a while, so I'm not like in it, but I see it all the time. I think that this is pretty common. I tried to actually look up like some studies. I didn't find any personally that tied like the different hormones, estrogen versus testosterone, to somebody's like emotional connection during sex. But what I did find was like attachment styles, and certain people are they have different attachments to other people. They have different social needs, and now that like the Tinder sex culture is what's common, there might be like a little too much shame related to not sleeping with people, not only wanting to be monogamous, things like that.
Let's go to. I guess we'll continue going clockwise. Sorry, Katie.
Muted.
Pro streamer. Wow,
We can't
just
hear you.
like amazing points coming from Katie. Katie, you're muted.
You're muted.
Muted.
All right, we'll continue on. All right, there you go.
Fine. Boo. Okay.
The most elegant I've ever heard you. Go ahead.
I will make the voice.
Okay, sorry, never mind.
Okay. Exclamation mark. Okay. I have hot takes on this a little bit. I think at the end of the day, when I talk about sex work, it comes down to the opinion of who I'm talking to about if there is a real distinction between sexual engagement and any other type of physical engagement. Like in the way that we separate sexual assault from just like physical assault, and how most people seem to treat those things as like fundamentally different. And I think depending on the answer and the exploration of that type of framework, you reach different conclusions. So I think if engaging sexually is inherently different than like using your body for construction, then the answer would vary massively. And I have my own opinions on that, but I feel like the panel is going to go slightly in a different direction. So I'm going to let it do that. And if somebody wants to engage, then we'll do that as well. I also know Lana is going to kick ass now. So I'm going to give her a lot of space before I get hurt. So there you go.
All right, I have a bunch to fucking say on this topic. All right.
Jeez.
So, I just want to start off by saying, so the other day I actually went to my OBGYN and she asked me, oh, hey, like, how many sexual partners have you had? And she looked shocked. So we'll start with that. I've had a lot of partners. I've had a lot of sex. I'm poly. And so I don't think that like sex has to be inherently like harmful for people, for women in particular. I do think that for me, like the concept that like a woman could just as easily like have a lot of casual sex is a lot harder for men, not necessarily because of like any like chemical reasons or it honestly comes down to like eventually you're going to get raped. Because like when you just have like a lot of casual sex, men treat you like you aren't a real person, and so they'll just violate your consent at some point. Like when you have sex with people who don't value you, you're not a wife. They're just gonna like fucking rape you at some point. Like if you like do it enough times, you're just gonna run into an asshole,
Jesus.
or you're gonna be drunk, or like something's gonna happen. So like eventually like
God
the
damn.
concept of like having casual sex just becomes like less attractive like after that happens, especially a couple times, at least in my experience. So like I definitely think like women can have casual sex, but like I think like basically if you decide or want to do that, it just like becomes harder over time, and you end up like eventually converging into like mostly having sex in relationships, because the type of men who keep raping people keep not getting partners, then they keep like making bad decisions and preying on very young women who can't pick up on cues of like what is acceptable behavior. And then I secondly wanted to say that I don't think that casual sex has to be more likely self-harm for women than men, but I acknowledge that like you can definitely have sex that is like self-harm for sure. But I think that's like for you and like maybe your therapist to kind of decide. I'm also bipolar, so I'm very aware of like hypersexuality, and like I've definitely met people who like use sex as self-harm. I've maybe had periods where that's been a thing. But I wouldn't say it's like a huge problem in my life. But I think that definitely can occur, but I don't think it's like more likely for women or something like that. I've definitely met men who have sex as self-harm. Pickup artists totally fall into that category. They have sex to degrade their version of what other people are. It's so fucked up. Okay. And then thirdly, so I'm a stripper. So a lot of people who are sex workers on Twitch are mostly like cam people. They mostly do like camming, like online work. I'm a stripper. I've been a stripper for about like almost 3 years, and I love it. And so I have a lot of comments on sex work. We can get more into it later. about like my views on sex work, but for the most part, like I do want to dismiss, like I don't think sex work is empowering for women. I don't think it's inherently harmful either. I think it totally depends on the context, like why you're doing it. And I want to say really briefly, like there's a difference between trafficking, survival sex work, and like sex work that you're basically doing completely consensually. So
Interesting. Love to hear it. Thank you so much, Zealous. You might be muted, buddy. Zealous.
It's
What?
a
Can you-
pain.
Okay. Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. So there is definitely a stigma on sex when it comes to women. Like, you have too much sex, you're a slut, like, things like that. That I do think are harmful and problematic. To whether or not women can engage in sex without emotions, I think that I don't think anyone can really engage in sex without emotions. But I think men do less, definitely, than women. I think that women are more sensitive to developing feelings when sex is involved, simply just because of biology. So, like, when you have sex, your body, I don't know if it's produces or releases what's called oxytocin, which is called the love hormone, and women are more sensitive to it and have higher levels of it. So it's like, I don't think you can engage in sex without emotions. Um, do I think that women can engage in sex that is self-harming? Yes. Do I think that sex work, if women can engage in sex work in a way that's not self-harming, um, I think that, I don't know. To me, I feel like sex work is something that's been around since the beginning of time. Like, there's always been women, selling themselves, you know, selling their sexual nature, and there's men who don't have men who have their reasons for seeking out their services and things like that. Um, I don't know if they can engage in it without it. That's not in a way that's self-harming, because I don't know what leads you there um, to want to do sex work. I was reading a study about how most prostitutes have been sexually assaulted as a child. So, like, I don't know if there are things that go into wanting to do sex work that are like subconscious things that you kind of like normalize, like how we were talking earlier about how you've had things happen to you that you don't recognize as trauma, and I think you can internalize that. And yeah, that's essentially what I think.
Thank you so much, Zealous. All right, Shay.
Yeah, I don't really think that sex in and of itself is really harmful. And I don't think me personally, I cannot really enjoy sex if I am not emotionally engaged, if I do not feel some kind of intimacy for the person that I'm doing stuff with. But I also wanted to mention, I thought it was really funny whenever Zonia mentioned it, like the a little bit of the problematicness at the very end. And I just thought it was interesting because it does kind of presuppose that sex work can affect a woman's inherent value. And I think that in and of itself is kind of sort of the problem. Because I personally think sex work should be legal. I think it should be legalized and it should be regulated in a way where women, it's not as easy to victimize women or men in that situation. Because I feel like when it is criminalized, you sort of drive it underground. You sort of, like, because like what Lana was mentioning earlier, there are different types. And if you have to do sex work because it's the only thing you really have access to at that time, anything else isn't going to provide for you in the way that you need. Definitely, like, I don't think it's fair, right? And I also think I remember reading an article and it was talking about how when it comes to men and women who are entering into a relationship or entering into sex, they want the intimacy before, or not necessarily the intimacy, but that emotional connection, that desire to sort of lead into sex. Whereas men's kind of see the point of sex being the emotional connection. Like that is where the connection sort of starts. And I don't know if anyone here can relate, but once you sort of, for me, whenever I have sex with someone, or especially men, like they open up a lot more. It's a lot easier for them to sort of talk about the way they feel and be more open about it. And ultimately, I think, and this is anecdotal, but I think a lot of women just want to be desired, right? So like kind of what she was mentioning, or I can't remember, it might have been Katie or Cyrus who mentioned it earlier. Men might not, women aren't as invested, or maybe don't pay as much as attentive to men during intercourse. And I think it comes from a place of, during intercourse, women kind of want to be desired or worshipped in a way. And like, I've always kind of vibed with that. So.
Thank you. And finally, April.
Yeah, I want to say that sex work can be traumatizing, and sex work is traumatizing for a lot of people who do it. But the thing is that, like, all work can be traumatizing for people, and there's a lot of different ways to do sex work that's going to be easier or harder to do. So it's really hard to generalize in general for something as broad and varied as sex work. If you're doing sex work, if you're camming and you need to do it to like pay bills, that kind of stress is going to have emotional toll. And I know that like camming is like, it's not as brutal as like, you know, doing in real life sex work a lot of times, but it's still really difficult for people, right? So even on like the easier end, you're in your room, you're like not worried about being assaulted, it can still be really hard for people. So, I mean, that's one level. I think that also when we talk about like sex and women engaging in casual sex, there is like a strongman version of the argument for why it can be a little bit dangerous. And that's like, first of all, it is, you know, physically dangerous for people. You know, as was discussed earlier in the panel, like there's a lot of people who will engage in rape or sexual assault if you have a lot of sex as a woman. But moreover, I think that a lot of times if you are a woman and you're having a lot of sex in your 20s, that's when you have like a lot of high sexual market value, and you have like the easiest chance of finding a partner who's going to settle down with you long term. But with guys, it's sort of the opposite, where guys develop like more sexual appeal to women later in life. So I think there's like sort of a mismatch here, where when women are choosing to really go out there and have a lot of sex and look for those sorts of relationships, they're often disappointed with the men they find in their age bracket who are not wanting to have relationships with them because they're just wanting to have lots and lots of sex. And this idea that like, you know, it's totally fine, you know, as long as two people consent is like so ostensibly true. But there's also this like problematic social factor where men will have lots of sex in their 20s and then they'll get older they'll, get a good career, they'll have money, and then they'll just like find a younger woman to partner off with. And it leaves a lot of women feeling something to be desired if they get older and realize that they spent their whole 20s, having lots of casual sex, but never actually settling down with someone. And now all the guys their age are going for younger women. I think that can be like pretty frustrating. So there's like a lot of dangers on all sides that are not necessarily visible when you're getting into sex, whether that be sex work or just casual sex. So it can be dangerous. Whether like it's inherently dangerous, I would definitely have problems with that, because like it's rare to find actions that are like inherently always going to have negative effects. But yeah, it can be bad, and we need to be like honest with ourselves about the realistic chance of people having good or bad experiences.
Into the panel.
That's all.
So it's painted that, well, I guess the question kind of comes down to is sex, so it's sort of framed like, is sex innately harmful, and therefore are things like casual sex or sex work doing harm to the person engaging in it. And I think that it's based on the premise that women are emotionally or need an emotional connection in order to engage in sex and to enjoy sex. And I think that would be an interesting thing to kind of pick apart, is that there, like, one person has stated here that they definitely have that kind of situation going for themselves. I know for me, I speak from a very different perspective, being asexual, having never enjoyed sex and not interested in ever doing it again. I come from a very different perspective, but I would think that it would just not make sense to claim that women innately need an emotional attachment to enjoy sex.
Yeah, anytime you say that like this gender innately needs this or always has this preference across all the millions of people, billions of people who are that gender, I think you get into like murky territory. Like there's always going to be exceptions. Maybe women on average want more of an emotional attachment to men. And part of that is just like, I think it's again like the times that women are having sex, especially like high school, college, are times when like women want a specific thing. Women might want a relationship, and guys are just not ready for that. And I think that's like where a lot of this sense comes from women. When women say that like no guy wants an emotional attachment, or like women want emotional attachment so much more than men, I think it's just like the time and place when people are having sex. Because if you get older into your 30s and 40s, a lot of guys are looking for that emotional attachment. They are looking to settle down. But yeah, there's just like, I think there's a lot of times a mismatch when men and women come to the point where they're ready for that long-term attachment.
I just think that we have to have a conversation about how women aren't even allowed to like enjoy sex socially. Like women aren't allowed to ask for good sex in like a lot of conversations. So that plays into it as well, because women are kind of put in this situation where I feel like emotional attachment is kind of prioritized, because for so long socially women haven't been able to address like concerns about bad sex with men ever, because of the risk of violence, because of men not being able to take criticism because of toxic masculinity. So conversations around women and femme people having sex have to involve the fact that we have never been in a position to actually ask for good sex. And so that kind of clouds so many of the interactions that women have with their partners, especially in like hookup and dating culture that we see now. Like a lot of women, it's kind of retaliatory how they are engaging in dating culture now. Because for a long time, women saw men out playing the field, out spreading their seed. This was all very normal, like, discourse to be happening, while they weren't offered the same privilege. Now that women are offered the same privilege, I feel like there are those who go out and do that, thinking it will give them some sort of satisfaction, or like they'll be on the same sort of level as men in, I guess, the dating sphere. And I don't know about you guys, but it doesn't really seem like sociologically it's working out that great for anyone. So I just think it's really, really complex when we talk about women engaging in sex, and especially women engaging in good sex, because like casual sex never really ends up that good. And I mean, like, it can, so I've heard, but like, does that add or make sense, sort of?
Yeah, I have three things to quickly interject. Like the comments about like inherent in biology and hormones and serotonin. Yeah, it's all great. Whether biological factors mean that women are more inclined to do X, Z, or Y. I think I hate when people bring that into the conversation, not just about women, about anything. Men are more likely to do this. Young boys are more like, the thing is, as a society, we don't want to restrict anyone. Even if women were more like, wait, April, give me a second. You scared me. What I mean is, even if, even if it's true that biologically women need more emotional connection to enjoy sex on average, we wouldn't want to enforce any social rules to like counter for that. We want people to engage however they want to engage. So I don't think like whether someone is biologically inclined to do X or Y is truly relevant in any like reasonable way to a discussion. Another thing that I think is going to matter if you talk like emotions is that I think if you go around and ask each of us what emotional attachment means, you're going to get very different answers. Very different answers. And I think that's crucial because I don't think what Shay means is what I mean when I say being emotionally attached to someone. I think you can be incredibly intimate with someone you met an hour ago, but that might not be emotional attachment in the way that other people mean it. So I think that's very important to the conversation. And Pixel, what you said was very interesting to me personally. Not so much in the concept of good sex, but how women are like not really socialized to be okay with them wanting sex and them wanting to enjoy sex. Like I know for me, it's really hard for me like sexually to assert myself in a way that's like, oh yes, I want this. Like I need the guy to want it because I feel too like ashamed and guilty about wanting it for myself. And that's like internalized socializations in that way. And what you said was very interesting to me in that sense. Although later I disagreed with you a little bit about the sociology thing, but we'll get into it. It's fine.
I know the way I see it is like kind of like what you mentioned, Katie, about like not gatekeeping it, right? But more about, well, I'm trying to remember what you said early on when you first started talking about it. But the like from my perspective is I think everybody should be like I think it's inappropriate for people to be judging women for being for pursuing casual sex or pursuing sex work, and it does create this social wall that makes people feel like they're doing the wrong thing, or they're embarrassed, or you know, or they're going to be like slut shamed for being more open about the the desire for sex and for wanting good sex and such. So I think that that's kind of the thing that really needs to be addressed. In a way, the whole framing of the topic kind of sets a problematic tone in a way. The better question is why why are we judging women who want to pursue sexuality in a more casual way? And how do we address that? How do we prevent that from continuing to be this social wall?
The answer is patriarchy to that.
Tear down the patriarchy.
That is why women get judged for wanting sex, because controlling women's sex has been the way women have been controlled for a very, very long time. It began, in order to make sure that, the bloodline and the inheritance could be passed down to the correct bloodline. And it went on from there, basically. And it's always been used that way to control women. And so that's where slut shaming just comes in all of the time, because it is a woman pushing back against the constraints of society for a lot of it.
I mean, I
we
do
can
think
go
there
home.
needs to be like
Patriarchy.
a cultural
Problem solved.
force.
Time for some misandry going on here. Let's get the misandry out.
We're waiting for it.
I might take like a sort of controversial position here, and that's that I think that like there does need to be some sort of cultural force to like actively warn women about the kind of consequences of engaging in casual sex, like what we've talked about.
Particularly women?
Yeah,
not
particularly women.
Why?
Again, this is like what I talked about earlier regarding sexual market value. When like a woman spends her 20s engaging in a lot of casual sex and then gets to be like 30 or 40, a lot of women realize that their dating pool is going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot harder to find a guy that's going to work with them and develop that emotional intimacy. Not to say it's impossible, it's just going to be more difficult. And so women like should be aware that this is an effect that happens, and that guys, unfortunately, and like it fucking sucks, but like a lot of guys can get away with engaging in a lot of casual sex when they're younger. And then when they're older and they have more money and their sexual attraction to women has not decreased a ton, you look at like surveys on men and women, and when they find partners of the opposite sex most attractive,
but there's a lot of assumptions going into what you're saying, right? We're assuming that all women care about like their market value, that they're all looking for like the social connection, that they're all wanting to be monogamous and end up in a long like lasting relationship, that those things are reasonable, or that we should like encourage them.
So to say that like all women are this way is not true, right? It's just a matter of like women, I think, would benefit from being aware that like this is an effect that happens.
But women are incredibly aware of it. Aren't we all like incredibly aware of it?
I also think we have to push back against it.
Yeah,
because
I agree.
It should also be some responsibility of men to realize like there are two types of attractive men, right? There has been like the attractive young man and then the attractive older man. For women in society, we have only ever been perceived as attractive when we're young. Society shits on older women. Older women become invisible. And that is a conversation we should be having about a societal shift rather than like, I don't know, feeling like we're reinforcing it. Like I understand what you're saying.
I don't think you can shift it societally, though. I think that's just part of how
you can't
men's
sit
brains
here
work.
and be like, basically like, women in your 30s, you have to care about marriage and having kids and stuff like that, and
You
like
don't have
not
to.
acknowledge that like people tell you that all literally. Like, if you go back to the 80s, people were saying that then. Like, they were saying, like, oh, make sure... They would literally perpetuate myths about pregnancy to scare women into stop having, like, having casual sex and make sure to get married as young as possible, because you have to be barely 18 for men to fucking be attracted to you because you're almost a child. And that's not weird at all. But the concept that you would want a partner that's actually on your level, that men actually get their emotional shit together and actually try to work on themselves past the concept of like only doing it for a partner. Like, nobody ever wants to talk about the ways that men should improve their behavior to make the dating pool better. It's always women's fault.
I think it's just a strategy. Like women should just be aware of if they want to succeed strategically in the dating market. It's going to be harder if they're doing that when they're older. And like, yeah, that does suck. But like the advice that I give to women is just to be like wary of that.
What is succeeding in the dating market, though? Like, what is success?
It varies from person to person. So, like, some people, if they want to settle down and have a family long term, success for them is settling down and having a family long term. If that's not something you're interested in, right? Like, you just enjoy casual sex and you want to do that, forever, fine. Like, go for it. Like, there's nothing I think inherently wrong with
But
that.
do you want to do that with a man who's not willing to date people his own age?
What? What do you mean?
You're essentially asking women to adjust the way that they engage with casual sex because men are not wanting to be in like true intimate relationships until they're in their 30s, and when they're in their 30s, they don't want to be with people their own age.
Which, I mean, again, that like sucks, but like men's preferences, like,
So
I think the average is like 23 with their ideal age, and that like doesn't change very much as they get older.
I can't personally imagine like wanting to do that for myself with the acknowledgement that it's because most men, or the man that I'm like going to be setting myself up for or up with, is not wanting to date people their own age. That's very like strange to me.
Yeah, and this is like another thing. You can definitely find younger guys who are your own age who are wanting to like date and settle down and have that intimacy. And you can find older guys who are in their 30s and 40s who want to date people who are in their 30s and 40s and settle down with them. That's definitely possible. Like, the unfortunate fact is just that it's more difficult.
Okay.
I'm not gonna lie, I feel like you're giving advice to people who didn't ask for it. Like unironically, like I feel like women. I have actually heard so many times why I shouldn't be having casual sex, why I shouldn't be doing this with my body, why I should be having a regular partner, why I should be monogamous, why I should wear this kind of makeup and shave my legs and do all these things to make all the moids happy. The ones who like don't respect me as a person, the ones who like don't fucking care about consent, the ones who want to date barely 18-year-olds because they're not emotionally mature enough to like, I don't know, like clean the kitchen or like act like an adult or like follow a real commitment or whatever. But somehow like I'm supposed to change my dating strategy, and like each individual woman has to like coordinate her like life choices to fit the possibility that a man might be into her, instead of men just not having shitty standards. If you like, if you're talking about labor, right? I'm just gonna like move this away and then bring it back. Like if you're talking about labor and you're like, man, like it sucks that people are not paying you $15 an hour. You don't go, well, you just keep taking the shitty wage and maybe you'll get a raise in a couple years. You like form a fucking union. And you all do the thing that you actually want to do in hopes that you'll find some sort of compromise. But if you like, if we as women keep perpetuating the myth that we have to continually give in to the shitty patriarchal demands that like men in concept, not even in reality, because men are attracted to like anything, honestly, like the concept that we should like give in to all of their stupid demands just because like doesn't actually benefit everyone. A lot of men complain that women don't actually like cater to their real desires, which is to be more authentic. Sometimes they're full of shit and sometimes they mean it. And then like women don't actually have a fulfilling relationship because they have to lie about who they are or do things they didn't want to do, and then cheat on the guy that they're dating in their 20s who he's in his 40s and she never actually was really attracted to because she didn't get to fuck when she was like ready to. You know what I mean? Like doing things in concept, trying to please someone that you're not actually interested in, doesn't actually make for better relationships anyway.
Also, if we don't push back against this, then like, I mean, older men are just going to keep, like, you realize as you get older, these men are just going to leave you for someone younger over and over again. The cycle continues. So
I
like,
think
if
there's a
don't push back
miscommunication.
That's why it's good to
I
have
would
like
really
a religion
that.
that encourages people to like work through problems in marriages and not just engage in, divorce at the slightest issue.
Wait, you find it more likely that rather than pushing us kind of against the patriarchy, you think that we're going to go back like towards religion?
I think it would be beneficial in many ways, yeah.
Well, so would like
patriarchal religion?
Dismantling the patriarchy. So with that, in this case at least.
I mean,
can I say something?
Yeah, you're bursting at the
sorry,
seams.
Katie.
April, I forgot you're a conservative. This is where it comes out. I had forgotten. Thank you for reminding me. But
You're
please,
welcome,
Katie.
So I had something to say for a while. So everything I'm saying is outside the context of you now talking about religion, because I'd have a different argument
move
now
there
that I
next.
know
We'll
that
go there
that's part of it. So I'm just going to pretend like I didn't hear that part and just gonna do what I was gonna do before. I think that there's like a miscommunication. What I'm hearing, and I feel like a lot of other people are hearing, is that April, you see something that happens in society, and it seems to either be very strongly culturally ingrained or biological, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't really matter. And you're saying, look, this is reality. We have to contend with reality. So I'm offering certain like tips. What it sounds to me and why it's triggering for me to hear it, because it kind of sounds like you shouldn't walk around at night with a tank top because you might get raped. And then it's kind of like, well, I feel like it's not my responsibility to make sure people don't rape me. I think they just shouldn't, you know? And I think that's what a lot of people are hearing. And that was why there's like this resistance, because we want you to be like, well, there's this fucked up thing about society and we recognize it and we see it. And now we push against it instead of being like, well, that's how things are. We're just going to learn to contend with it. You know, like we're trying to assume change. And I think there was like, I thought there was a disconnect in communication there, but then the religion thing came up and I'm not so sure anymore. So I'm going to let you see what happens with that. And we'll go from there.
I mean, I think I can like maybe offer a bit of an olive branch here. And that's to say that like a lot of the social dynamics that like cause men to have a lot of power when they get older, it makes them like more able to like go after younger women are like not good. And so we should like work to make sure that men and women, especially when it comes to like economic success, have like equal access. So women are not like dependent on men when they're, you know, dependent on older men, that sort of thing. The only place that I would push back is I would say that like men being attracted to women in their 20s and women being attracted on average to guys who are a few years older than them, I don't think that's comparable to rape. And I don't think that's something that like we necessarily need to like propagandize out of the population. That seems to
But
be
it is
something
propagandized into the population.
I would disagree.
But you were the one when we started talking about this, that you're like, we can't make very broad generalizations about groups of like billions of people. So to say that all men are attracted to people who are on average are 20. On average. Okay, on average. But do you think, so you think the factors that drive men to mostly seek out very young women or women who are younger than them are not stuff that we can socialize out, that we can change? Or do you just not want to do that?
No, I would say that like with enough propaganda, you could probably get men to pursue women like of their age regardless. But I think they would still be attracted to younger women in their 20s.
Yeah, but they can be attracted to anyone. First of all, being attracted is not the same as pursuing it, which you made that distinction. That's fine. My question is, so you're saying with enough propaganda, we can get men to like accept women in their 30s, okay? And that's a bit of like an inflammatory way of like saying what you said.
Yeah.
I take ownership to that. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit.
It's fine. It's good for the panel.
Okay. Yeah. So, but what I'm trying to ask you, and I think what the panel is feeling, or at least what I'm feeling, is that it feels like men looking out for younger women in the way that you're describing is propagandized in, or was propagandized in for like thousands of years. And now it's time to be rid of it. So I guess in the sense that if they brainwashed you into X, you'll probably need to brainwash yourself into Y to counter for X. But it's to call one propaganda and one just like a fact of life seems a bit silly to me. So maybe I'm not understanding it.
Well,
so can we just talk about how many people have religious trauma related to sex from religion? Like, that's the weirdest thing to me, because like there are a fuck ton of people out there with some major religious trauma because of what religion has told us about sex, that it is a sin unless it is between a man and a woman in marriage. Do you know how many people have like had their lives like ruined from that sort of rhetoric?
Not just that, but also the shame of the naked body, the human body that you're born with, right? So there are layers onto that. where Christianity really kind of pushes a narrative that you should be ashamed of your nakedness, you should hide it from others, except for the person that you're, intimately involved with, your soul partner, your soul, gender normative partner, and so there are so many layers to religion being a culprit in making people feel shame of their sexuality, their natural human body, etc. Yeah, many layers to that problem.
Can I just say to all the like assholes in the chat who are like literally just talking about like raping women for wearing a tank top, like you need to like chill out and like honestly get some help, because I understand being sexually desperate is like a problem, but like honestly like chill the fuck out. Like I promise it will not help you in the long run. Like get laid. Like just facts. Like work on your like game and then go from there. Like you don't have to like threaten women. I promise it won't get you
Their
more sex.
game is, I see a tank top, she's clearly signaling she wants it, let's fucking go.
Yeah, literally.
Time to start bringing out the misandry. I told you we were going to need it before long.
I don't know what's happening in chat, but I don't think it's misandry to be upset about rape.
Yeah, it's also
You know?
counterintuitive to feminism. Misandry actually is rather problematic within feminism a lot of the time, because we actually need to be able to have these conversations with men in order to be able to progress beyond traditional. It is not like you got yours, so now I'm getting mine. I understand that exists within feminism, but like it's so incredibly counterintuitive to where we want to go as femme people in this world, where hopefully we have a little bit more. You can't fight fire with fire. Like it doesn't work, and it
But
just
sometimes
deepens
criticism
the divide.
of men comes off as misandry. So men are very bad at understanding the difference between like just asking them to step up and be like an equal partner and looking for equality. Kind of like what we talked about earlier about how Cyrus said, look, I don't want a partner who's looking to only be into me when I'm 23. Like if I'm 33 and they don't want me, it's like they're not a fucking good partner. Yeah, get the fuck out. And I agree, right? So I think that women, because socialization, everybody talks about how how men infantilize women, but I think we infantilize men. We almost don't expect them to participate. We don't expect them to try to understand, to try to improve, to try to work towards things. Shut up, Prime. Like, I'm going to bring up race relations into that. It's kind of like how white people are so fucking jaded and don't fucking care about trying to work for like equal racial like relations. It's the same. Like women are not going to change like misogynism and like the patriarchy alone. Guys need to step up to the plate, and we need to ask them to do that, and that's not fucking misogyny. That's just like,
also like
be a man.
Yeah, and like April, what kind of religion does like help in this situation? Like I'm actually really interested in your opinion here, because I'm genuinely confused at, I guess, where it comes from and how you think it can fix the situation that women are in regards to sex and long-term partnership.
Yeah, so I think religion has two beneficial aspects here. One is in marriage. So this is like why religion was brought up. A lot of religions will encourage people to stick with their partner and to work through problems if possible. So like Islam is a religion that does this, Judaism as well, Christianity as well, to different degrees. But all of these religions will tell people that, what you should do is you should work with your community, you should talk about problems in your marriage, and you should try to find solutions. I think that sometimes in like modern progressive discourse, the immediate impulse is like you can just like find another person. I think that's a little bit dangerous. So like a little bit more social encouragement and community that's willing to support people through difficult times that you can get through a religion is beneficial. The other way that we talked about, or I maybe implied, was that religion can help people to really center things like family and family and the building of that kind of prosperous, intimate relationship as something as your goal. And to keep both men and women, thinking about that, I think is maybe beneficial because it can help people to really focus on what's going to be important later in life. And like I said earlier, it can be really difficult for a lot of women to find that as they get older. So having that kind of religious basis that tells them we've got these like centuries, millennia of human experience, ancestors who've come to the conclusion that you're going to find a lot of meaning, or there's a potential that in the future you'll find a lot of meaning in intimacy and long-term, stable relationships with someone. So maybe try to focus on achieving that. And if that's really not working for you, then I would say, go do the casual sex thing.
I want to point out that not all people are looking for marriage, and if you are looking for marriage, there are definitely certain strategies you should use, right? Like whatever type of relationship dynamic or whatever type of like lifestyle or whatever you're looking for, you should totally there's going to be advice that's like suited to your specific choices. I do want to point out that not everyone is interested in getting married, not everyone's interested in having kids. I personally think that polyamory is a great solution to having a hard time finding people. Because if more people are polyamorous, then you're not exclusive to one partner, so you can have a multitude of people, and if something happens to one person, there's other people there for you, and you don't always need a religious community. And yeah, I definitely disagree a lot, because I have a different goal, but I understand where you're coming from, that if you're religious, that's definitely something that's really helpful. I haven't had great experiences with religion. They slut shame me a lot. They were pretty shitty to me about being bisexual. They definitely told me that I was too outspoken and that I shouldn't act in certain ways. And overall they were just very judgy people, so I haven't had good experiences with religion. I'm sure other people have. I've met other religious people who are not that way. But I just want to point out that's not for everyone for a multitude of reasons, and yeah.
I think you've also got to be careful selecting a religious community that's appropriate for you, because realistically speaking, there's a lot of awful religious communities that are abusive, that are totalitarian, that are cult-like. There are religious communities that are going to try to control your entire sexuality, and that are going to deeply shame you and abuse you for things you've done. And there are religious communities that are, I think, much more beneficially focused on prosperity and growth and talking to you about your goals and where you want to be in the future. I would also say that just to temper things, and again offer an olive branch. If you're the kind of person who is very adept and capable of having polyamorous relationships, that's not personally me, but lots of people can do that. Great, good. And if you're the kind of person who's very comfortable and able having lots of casual sex, again, that's not necessarily me, but if that's you, good, great, do it. I think that that pathway should be open to you, but there's also benefit in just being a little bit mindful for a lot of people that, when you're younger, sometimes that path of a great deal of casual sex seems very enticing, and a lot of people change their mind when they're older. So I would just be wary of that for some people.
But also,
Okay,
I just. Sorry.
Okay, Cyrus, I believe you had your hand up. Yeah, and,
Well,
and
that
just
that
for
answers.
everyone, just to make it easier for me, let's do alpha palms, right, to the camera, right, so that I can see you. No beta hands here. Alpha palms. All right, go ahead, Cyrus.
All right. Cool, because that kind of gets to answering part of my question, but this is probably not something you have time for here. But how? Because you say you want more economic equality, so women are not so easily taken advantage of, and it's just generally better for society. But how would you go about finding or changing a religion? Because we already have these large established religions in the United States, particularly 'cause that's where I live, um, that have these like preset ideals. I mean, they're written down in books. They've been repeated over and over again. They've been changed somewhat slowly. Um, so there's like that. I would want to know like what are your ideas on that, and then um, one of your like main arguments against like changing the way that men see women and how we like dismantle the patriarchy so that men don't see younger women as like inherently attractive, more attractive than people their own age, was that like you can't make societal changes in that way. And I think moving back to religion is like a way bigger ask to move society towards. I think we're headed away.
Well, I'm not sure. Do you support dismantling the patriarchy? Because now I'm confused. I don't really see any religious like establishment that would actually support like significantly and fundamentally
I actually do know of
dismantling.
one personally,
Really?
just to cut
Is
in.
it Christian?
Yes, Quakerism is weird. The
Okay.
Quakers are largely like very socially progressive. Even like, most of them are probably economically progressive as well, and the
Are
vast
you a
majority are
Quaker,
Christian.
April?
Am I a Christian?
I don't. I was asking you if you're a
If you're a
Quaker.
Quaker,
I'm a Quaker. I'm not a Quaker. I'm not a Christian either, or
Oh, okay.
I don't identify with any like main religion.
Do you think is dismantling the patriarchy something you see a benefit in?
I think it's like such a broad statement that I'm not exactly sure what it means. You'd have to like tell me like
that's fair.
this thing or that thing, just because that can mean like so many different things to different
Okay,
people.
Do women
using
have a
social
specific
means.
role? Sorry.
Yeah,
Sorry,
just
I didn't
repeat
mean
that
to
because I
interrupt.
didn't hear.
No, go ahead, Pixel. It's fine. It's good.
No. Please continue. I really didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was gonna ask if like using social means to try to promote women to go down certain paths that are not necessarily what they want because it's beneficial to society.
What would an example of that be?
An example of that would be like we need to have children, so women should usually be oriented into having children
Yeah, I mean,
because we
kind
need them
of.
for that.
I would say that like one of the functions of a religious community is that it can help women to see having children as less of a burden, ideally. So like if you are a young woman who's not making a lot of money, having a child can be like a massive economic burden on it could be like a restriction of your freedom in many ways. So there's like a lot of difficulties with having a child that I think ideally if you're forming connections with people and really building community, you'll have people in your life who can work with you to watch the child or to provide
Yeah, but what I'm
supplies for the
asking
child.
is it necessary or do we want to promote women having children?
I mean, I would say that like having that community does promote women having children, and that's probably a good thing for like the continued existence of humanity.
But also,
Okay.
like you could also encourage, like, so you're saying like, oh, it's a big burden for women. You could also like promote the concept that like men just take on their fair share of the responsibilities in childbearing, which they
Oh
just
yeah.
continually refuse to do, and only do most of the time like in bad situations, like because they legally have to pay child support, and they could just help with actual child care duties instead of just giving a little bit of money, which is basically a fraction of the cost when you actually take into account like opportunity cost when it comes to the cost to your career for having to make sacrifices for children, when it comes to actually spending that time and doing that labor, the emotional burden, the sacrifices you personally have to make in your household, and all of
See,
that, which men just don't have, like aren't expected to do currently.
I don't know if it's your opinion, April, so I'm interested on this as well. Do
Mhm.
you think women are better suited to rear children than men?
No, I would say that like men and women both have extremely important roles to play in rearing children, and like doing it with only a man or a woman has negative effects, and we see that like in data.
What about two women?
Yeah, I think it's all right. I think that the data sort of talks about like father parenting styles and woman parent or like mother parenting styles, and it gets to like you need someone who is a parent of the child who is encouraging them to like telling the child that they're loved and they're accepted and they can like make mistakes and whatnot, and that's considered like a maternal parenting style. And it's beneficial to have that like contrasted with a parenting style that says like, you're totally capable, and like if you fuck up or like fall, you don't need to be coddled necessarily. You can like get up and keep running, and that's called like father parenting style. And having like a variety of parenting styles, basically, where like both parents teach different lessons to the child, is beneficial. So it doesn't necessarily need to be like a man and a woman, but just having like a diversity of virtues that are taught to the child is good.
Okay, so it's not about the gender of the parent, it's about like their parenting style.
I would say so.
I can agree with that.
And there can be like mixes, right? You can have like a father who does like some like quote unquote maternal parenting style, and that's like appropriate.
So I wanted to try to like rally back a little bit. There's some like when you're opening statements, you guys had so many interesting
Yeah, we got to
avenues.
religion, and that's it. We're
So
stuck now.
I wanted
Unlock our
to
religion.
engage Pixel here. Hi, Pixel. You were talking about like that good like casual sex can't be good sex, or like I don't want to like put words in your mouth. So I want to understand.
No.
your point.
I'm just saying that a lot of the time when women engage in casual sex, it is very, very difficult to be able to ask for like what you want, because you a lot of times have to navigate somebody else's ego. Like it depends on we're trying to talk about between like what is casual sex and what isn't casual sex, because there's a whole spectrum of like how you can exist along in that area, basically. I'm just saying that I think one of the biggest problems that women have when discussing sex as something that is a part of women's lives and not something that should be just like not talked about because for whatever reasons it's seen as impure or dirty or not womanly or not motherly, right? Is that in a lot of cases and in a lot of marriages, women aren't actually allowed to ask for it to be an enjoyable experience. And that's because of the patriarchy. It is because sex has always been viewed as something that a man does to a woman, and a woman just is happy about it.
Okay.
Does that kind of make sense? Whereas, like, we need to give women more agency in these situations to be able to talk to men about what they might like or how it could be an enjoyable experience for them.
Oh, absolutely.
Can I expand on that?
Yeah, give me 1 second. Absolutely, I agree with you on that point. So maybe I guess I misunderstood what your focus was on. Because before it sounded like you just meant like the troubles you were describing just existed in casual sex, and that like,
Oh, no,
if
no,
you
no.
if you
They
get to the
exist.
promised land, yeah, of like a committed relationship, that these things kind of go away. But clearly, that's not what you meant. Okay.
No. You can have great casual sex, like if you are able to communicate about what you want, right, beforehand. I'm just saying that a lot of people who engage in casual experiences probably get like a bit of a shitty end of the stick when it comes to it, because a lot of men don't even want to talk about what they're going to do beforehand because it's like not masculine or whatever. Like it's very interesting to navigate all sorts of like sexual dynamics and stuff like that. But I definitely don't think it's a one size fits all situation.
Fair enough. Katie, if you want to say something, and if other people, I want to make sure, like Shay,
Hey,
say anything.
speak.
And like, you want to go first, Katie, or you want like
I'm
Shay
giving
and
Shay
then
my
Zonia?
time.
Okay.
All right, yeah, I just wanted to ask the panel a question, and it's pretty much, do you think porn has a relevant impact on how men and women view the connection of sex? Because there was a study or not a study, it was more of like an article that I had read that said women and men tend to actually consume porn at similar rates, but women are more likely to read porn, whereas and aren't. Men are more likely to watch it. And I think that's really interesting because the media of both of those two really has an interesting dichotomy.
If nobody else does, I have a really I think I have a lot of
Please go ahead.
So, okay, so I think one of the main reasons, I think there's kind of two main reasons why women are more into like written porn. And I think it actually has nothing to do with like the visual aspect. So people will say like, oh, like men are more visual. This is like fucking bullshit. The reality is that like porn is constructed for men. It is made with the male gaze in mind. I've heard like people talk about the male gaze mostly in reference to movies. This is depicted in honestly all different art forms. This is a really popular like feminist critique of movies. This is also true in porn, in my opinion, and I've actually had some like really interesting conversations with people about like what would the female gaze look like in movies. But in porn specifically, it's about viewing women as objects and viewing men as actors. And so I think that women would be a lot more interested in porn mediums that promote the image of like women being the actors, or at least being not even necessarily where they're like the dominant one in a lot of aspects, because you know, most women are submissive, I would say on average. We can argue whether that's like a societally imposed thing or whatever. That's a whole other conversation. But because of that, there is still a way that women have their own perspective of the events that occur, right? There's still a way that like the story would progress from the woman's perspective that's just very different from the man's perspective. And so because of that, a lot of porn that is like a movie or whatever is produced by men, and a lot of like written porn is produced by women. Like it's written by female authors and with like more female gaze in mind. Actually, like I've also heard so people will sometimes talk about like the problematic ways that gay men are fetishized in that type of porn because they're doing the same thing that men do to women.
Right, and but because there is no woman, it's almost as if there is no sex. Like I've read about that, where women will not, they're more likely to gravitate towards male on male porn simply because there is no woman to objectify, and I think that's really interesting.
Yes, that's a thing. Yes. I actually want to a little bit expand on what Lana said. I was just the other day with someone, and we were on cam together, and I was doing my thing, you know, basically how cam works. And then they were like, hey, you don't really ask me to like take my shirt off, or like, do you want me to lay back and show you stuff and stuff like that? And like that's not really interesting to me. Like I get that that's not what
Booting
I
up the
enjoy.
Hearthstone.
I enjoy
Hell
looking
yeah.
at your face. I enjoy listening to what you say. I enjoy like the interaction that we're having. I if I wanted to stare at dick, there are enough pictures of penises online. It's like it's not really about that for me. That's not what's going to do it for me. But they are coming from this perspective, like I know what turns me on. I want to see like vagina, or I want to see nipples. So obviously she would want that. So if she's not seeing nipples, she's unhappy. And I'm like, no, you need to listen to me. I know what I like. I'm having fun. It's just not how you think fun happens, and that's okay, you know. So I just think like the male gaze is a really interesting, like it permeates a lot further than just like movies, you know.
Um,
I
I
wish.
think. Go ahead. You know, saying please.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is such a difficult topic for me to chime in on because it's such an alien concept for me altogether. Like anything dealing with sex. Well, let me clear one thing up. When I was mentioning misandry before, I was joking around, by the way. I just thought it'd be funny to
Yeah.
trigger some people in chat. But I don't understand porn. I don't understand
Me
sex.
neither.
But I do observe a difference in what men tell me about like pornographic experience versus what women tell me. Like Shay, when you were mentioning what it's women read more pornography, I was very
Anna did.
confused by it because I didn't know what that meant. I was like, I was trying to reason that out. The only thing I had heard of were women reading romance novels, which I never once considered to be
Oh,
pornographic.
but spicy romance
And-
novels,
Yeah.
they exist.
Well, I like.
Wait,
I actually some of my
wait,
earliest
I have a
books.
clarifying question. Wait. Are not all romance novels porn? Because I thought they were.
I don't know.
I don't know.
They're erotica. They're more like
No.
they're
not?
like soft porn. They're more like soft, right? You
Okay,
know?
okay.
Like,
Continue. I just wanted to ask
Some-
that because I didn't know.
I actually really like text porn, and I've said this before. I'm a big fan of it, and so there's like a lot more explicit stuff than what you'll get like in a fucking
Well,
Okay.
so what confused
also
me
poorly
is
written.
because what
Not
confused me
necessarily.
is that some of my earliest books that I had read were actually romance novels, and I didn't think of them as pornographic. But again, that's kind of coming from my
I just got
perspective.
How old were you?
It seemed, I think I was 14,
No,
something like that.
okay, all right. When you said
15?
earliest books, I'm thinking
Well,
like
in
you're
terms of
6 or 7.
well, I didn't get a lot of reading done earlier than that because I spent a lot of time homeless and such, and so it was a slow start for me. But in terms of like exposure to reading novels full length, right? Romance novels are what I ended up getting access to, reading someone else's books, and they didn't seem to me like they were pornographic in any way. Like they
Hi,
had sexual
Hans.
scenes and stuff, but the scenes themselves didn't seem pornographic. It seemed like very much about like the a lot of like building up to a relationship and building up to like there's so much to the story and stuff, whereas when I think of pornography, I don't think of like a very deep story and much to do with the relationship. So I don't know, maybe just inexperience, but that's what I was kind of thinking. Like I don't know, I didn't know that women consume so much
It
pornography.
it depends on the story. So I'm fan fiction trash. I read and write this stuff. And there's like a big difference between like a 50,000 word, basically a novel, that has like all of the romance and the plot points, and then like some spicy stuff like in there tucked away. Those are their own like whole thing, but there's definitely like written porn. And the thing that I was gonna like bring up, but other people had things to say, was there is actually a difference that I've noticed in the way that men write porn and the way that women write porn. And it's like
Yes.
stuff that you wouldn't really think of. There's like, for whatever reason, there's like more
Just say it. Come on, get it out.
graphic. I would say some of it is like graphically disgusting depictions, like literally like bad smells and stuff. I've seen some of that. I'm not saying it's everywhere, but this is like the more interesting thing. That's more prominent. There's more descriptions of like actual sizes and lengths, and like the cup
Or like
sizes.
they
like,
start the
actual,
story
like,
and it's like she had like
heaving
34 DD
bosom.
boobs and like 14
the
inch waist.
badly
It's like
written ones, yes.
Oh no!
you're reading like a
I am not
stats sheet.
expected this.
No, okay. You guys are overplaying this.
confusing.
No. I'm going to defend porn writers everywhere. No. First of all, like, I've read a lot. Of these stories, hundreds of them. I'm a huge fan. But, like, the dirtiest text porn I've read has all been from women. All been from women.
Oh, it
Right?
depends.
Like, the most
I believe that.
graphic and the most in terms of I guess the kinkiness, right? Like the most terrible stuff, right, that I've ever read has been from minds of women, like by far, not even close.
I think
So
it
I'm
probably
putting it out there.
depends on the
And-
kink. I'm not talking about kink. I'm talking about like the typical like smells of a person, right?
I don't know where this is
are
coming
not
from.
quite pleasant,
I
right?
don't-
Listen,
I don't
think
know
you
where
know
this
it's
is coming
written
if
by
somebody
Zai.
comments on smell, right? If somebody comments on smell, that's a very particular thing.
Yeah.
That's all.
That's a very
That
particular
is a realm that you either are there or you aren't. Like,
with written romance novels, at least the ones that I had read, it is talking about like the like one I'm thinking of, there was like heat in the tent that was causing like um the steam to like speckle the upper part of the tent and stuff, and the sweat between their bodies and stuff. And so it's talking about these kinds of things, but I don't know, it just seems very different to me when it comes like from what romance novels describe, at least from my experience, versus what I have seen and heard of the pornography that is consumed primarily by men.
If
I
everyone
wanted to say something really quickly. Someone talked about like changing the porn. I forget which one said that, but talking about changing that and like from there changing society. I think that's like a bad idea in terms of like an effective strategy, because one, you can have a few companies that will decide, okay, all of a sudden we'll have equitable porn, whatever that looks like to you, whatever you imagine that to be, right? Equitable porn. Well, and they can do that. Maybe they'll be successful at it, but there's always going to be some other people providing, right, the raunchier stuff. And like it's a medium where people just get to choose, right? So people will choose whatever they want. And it just seems like an easier way to do it rather than like trying to change like the product is to just have these conversations like we're trying to have now with other people, right?
The
And
answer,
have
oh,
a deeper. Go on.
the answer is giving women agency and allowing women to be perceived with agency, because that will change everything. Sex will no longer be something that is done to women. They are an active participant in these things, including porn, right? It's not just this woman, object of man, come on face. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's giving women agency so that the entire conversation can change. Sorry for interrupting.
So you do
No,
think
That was great. That was worth it. Do that again.
Do you think like equitable porn can be a contributing factor in dismantling these systems? I mean, I kind of like, I almost cringe at the phrase,
think
because I've heard it used so weirdly before, but
I just think that right now, through the patriarchy, there is still a lot of porn that is depicted as abusive towards women. And to do with kink, I think that there are consensual elements there, and I think that's fine. But there are also like, I think really problematic things. Like what about when the choking trend went around on TikTok, right? And all of these like 19-year-old kids were like pretending they were choking their girlfriends because women love to be choked, or women love to be choked. And that went around on TikTok for ages. And there were like little 19-year-old boys crushing windpipes all over the place because they had no idea what the fuck they were doing, right? Because it had been depicted in porn as something women were like, yes, please, always. Right? And I know plenty of women who have been in a situation where someone has gone to do that and they're like, maybe not. Or like, no, like I know society told you this is something that all women like, but not me. And like, there's nothing wrong with liking it. I ain't kink shaming here, by the way. Like, no problems with it. I'm just saying there should be less assumptions and more agency for women in general. Does that make sense, sort of?
that's so...
I mean, that's always true. Yeah.
I don't know, you just blew my mind by like introducing me to that information.
Sorry.
My mind. No,
Yeah.
it's okay. I just there has to be like some sort of... Okay, so like my earliest like I'll just like be totally fuck it, like I'll just be open now. My earliest like sexual experiences were like freshman, sophomore year of high school. But I like have like this weird brain. I have like some quirks of personality where I can't relate to a lot of the things that you're saying, and I know why. And it's like, it's just like a weird quirk of my personality. But I like went online and like actually looked up like sex therapists and like what information they had. Are these kids like not doing any of that? And like obviously their school isn't, because how could somebody get that in their head that that would be okay to just like reach for somebody's windpipe when they haven't asked for it?
Yeah, it's because men are conditioned to think that they have to be dominant in in sexual situations, right? And so these things are kind of like a part of that. They're like, okay, the internet told me that in order to be an alpha male and attractive to women, I have to be dominant. Now, there are several ways I can engage in this, and one of those is just by pinning her down with my hand. Like, it was a thing that went around on TikTok a lot, and there are still like young men on TikTok being like, do you know what women love? Women love it when you do this. Secrets about what women love. There are so many of those TikToks. It is terrifying.
This might be a
Especially
tangent,
in like the pickup
but
culture, right? That's where a lot of
Yeah.
that comes from as
Somebody
well.
talk to
Yeah.
the kids. What is wrong with the kids? What the fuck? I don't know. Like, I'm sorry. This is
it's
like
not the
Hashtag
kids'
save the
fault. The
Zoomers.
adults are
Go,
like that too.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Lana,
it's
you're
also
muted.
religion though. Like, it's abstinence culture, it's purity culture. It's the fact that they're not allowed to talk about it with people who have the knowledge. So they talk to each other and they're like, "Yo, I heard like Sally really likes it when you do this." And then all of a sudden, around in that friendship group, they're all like, "Yeah, we'll all do that. Well, high five, alpha."
They don't
Like,
even
do you
talk
know?
to each other. They just watch porn and that's it. And they're like, this is real. Like straight up, they think that women are exactly like that. Like, you don't have to make some mythical ethical porn. You just have to include like some questions about consent and like make it so you don't actually like half kill a woman, like, and cuz I've seen some fucked up shit, man. Like, some of it's like pretty chill. Some of it's very extreme, and it seems like the porn that I watched when I was a kid is actually a lot less extreme than the porn that is like on the front page of Pornhub all the time. Like, it's so it was actually increasing in severity. And I'm not like anti-porn. I'm not kink shaming. I'm just saying like the algorithm, right? Like all of these other social media platforms are like relying on algorithms, and like Pornhub is making more extreme content because it hits that button harder, right? And it just keeps going in that direction and it sells more ads.
Yeah, it seems to me that there's like really perverse incentives in a lot of pornography to just create content that like is getting those clicks, but might be teaching not so good lessons to people.
Katie, I think you. Oh,
I
Katie.
did want to say I'm not anti-porn. Like, I think that porn needs to be changed to reflect more healthy relationships. I think that porn needs to be more realistic, which is why I actually think in a lot of ways like OnlyFans is kind of better than like Pornhub. Um and like the fact that like the person making the content is definitely consenting, is, you know, often trying to portray like aspects of their relationship, or either like their relationship if it's like a couple or whatever, but their actual personality is like something that's really different. Like, and a lot of like mainstream porn is like super abusive, but that doesn't mean that the concept is bad, but the execution currently is very bad, I would say.
Go ahead, Katie. You had something to say previously.
No, I think everyone is enjoying the porn discussion. I mean, like, so it's fine. We can keep
Sure.
going about
You had
it.
something that was pretty interesting.
No, it's good. It's good.
Okay.
I'm good.
Zealous, you didn't really get a chance to speak much. Want to make room for you.
There's a lot that's been said, and I was gone for a little bit. But to the porn discussion, all I can really think about is how it's being framed that like women have no agency when it comes to, I guess, at least in this context, the porn. And I'm wondering, like, do these women who are in these porns not have the choice to be there, or like, and who's stopping women from making their own porn? Like, I'm kind of
Well,
confused.
I can speak for me here. That's not the kind of agency I was talking about. The agency I was talking about is the way that it is depicted, like how the sex is depicted. So the woman has no agency within the scene, as in she is depicted as the visual object and the man is the actor, right? Where she has the agency to engage in that, not a problem, right? And, you know, she's free to do what she wants. But the depiction of agency is what I mean. Like a woman in like in a pornographic movie asking for something that she wants, rather than like just him coming on her face.
Yeah, like I would say there's a difference
Or
between
her asking for him to come on her face because that's what a guy would want to hear. Instead, like, hey, can you spend like 10 more minutes on my clit or no? Okay, good. Fine. Just come on my face then. I'm very happy. Okay, whatever.
So I don't. So for me, it's still like, so are you implying that the women there who have made the choice to be there don't agree with how they're partaking in the sex? And
It's not what they're saying. They're talking about, they're basically indicating that people are consuming this content, right? So we understand that any media that you watch, porn included, like does inform people's opinions. When I don't live in the United States, when I watch American movies, I know a lot about American culture from American movies. We don't have lockers in our high schools in Israel, but I know things that happen around like the lockers in school is a huge thing in the United States. And I know that from movies. Nobody told me that. So porn is like that, but with sex, but toxic. And that's what they're talking about. So the porn is depicting this thing, and you have like a 14, 13. I mean, I had friends that started watching porn when they were 8 years old, right? And they're learning about sex. But the sex that they're learning about is not actually sex that would be good probably for a lot of women who would have to participate in something like that. So the criticism isn't about the actual women who are participating in the production. It's more about the messages that think about porn as a movie, and you see a movie and it's like very, very violent. And then it comes up a lot when we talk about movies. You think, is this movie violent because we just enjoy the graphics of it, or does it have an artistic purpose? What is it telling me? What is it doing here? And a lot of porn, its purpose is to like, I mean, in a way, it's like to cater to men and what they like, but it also teaches them what they should like and what they should want, which is what the criticism is.
Or what's
Also, it
appropriate,
teaches
right?
women. Yeah, it teaches women as well. Like, how many women do you know that fake orgasms? Because, like, I know that there are a few women out there who absolutely fake
I don't know
orgasms
any.
because
I don't know
of what.
any of
Of
those.
course you don't. Like, do you know
Oh
what
my
I
God,
mean? Like,
dude, like I had a conversation today and I was talking to someone and I'm like, yeah,
This
I
game
already
is
came. I
so
don't want to come
fucking
again.
rigged.
I was talking to
Bullshit.
them. They were a friend and they're like, what? You don't have multiple orgasms? What are you, a guy? And I'm like, not all women have multiple orgasms and not all the time. And he like straight up didn't believe me. I was like, Google it, you fucking retard. It's like, Jesus
Sorry,
fucking
you know my
Christ.
body better than I do.
no,
Please
that's just
mansplain my body.
oh
My
no,
boy
but that,
hormones are like
but if
killing
that
my orgasms right now. Fuck you,
But if
dude.
that
Seriously.
man has been with like multiple women who have all just been like, oh, babe, thank you for my 7th orgasm in this 5-minute period every time. This is the biggest self-report ever. I'm just dying. It's so funny.
Before we entirely lose the topic, I did want to briefly comment and say, although like I understand what Kate's saying, like that the depiction in the porn is actually what we were commenting on, but I would also like to add the comment that I would infer, right, that the power dynamic that's actually present in the porn industry where women are treated as disposable sex objects by the actual producers on a personal and professional level, not for the fact that they're sex workers, but because there's a stigma attached to that, there's misogyny, there's patriarchy there, and that is actually what is being reflected in the porn, and that they do like they may like consent in some sort of way, but like they may like I personally know people who work in the porn industry, like who work in LA, who do have issues with the way that a lot of consent is
Yeah, the ethical
dubious.
production of a lot of porn is questionable. Similar to how sex work can be done ethically and not ethically, and it can be traumatizing and not traumatizing. So porn is just an extension of that.
Yes, but what I'm saying further is that I would actually say that the two are connected, that by treating women in the industry as individual like porn actresses or whatever, like treating them as objects is then reflected in the porn, in that when they do a scene, like they're not enjoying it most of the time, they're faking it. And instead of having like a real authentic like
guys are
session or
faking it
whatever.
too, though.
Yeah, no, I agree, but that's the problem, is that like the sex isn't realistic, and then when people learn from that as children, especially, which they shouldn't be, right? And then they go and do that in real life. Like, it doesn't work out because it's fucking fake. And people, like, you know, as an adult, you can have the wherewithal to say, like, oh, this makes sense. But, like, I've personally, like, gone to work and, like, people just start choking me because they are, like, 21 and they think that's okay to just, like, do to someone because, like, oh, woman I'm attracted to, I choke. And it's like, no, like, that's, I'm a real person. Like, you have to have a conversation. This isn't reflected in porn, like, in the actual video, and it should be.
I'm gonna go further and say that lack of agency is a result of just plain old capitalism.
Oh yeah.
Ooh.
There is also, so it is a capitalism thing,
hold on.
it is a patriarchy thing, and it is also like a whorephobia thing as well. So like the demeaning of like sex workers specifically.
So, is there any accountability for the women partaking in those harmful ideas and concepts of sex? And is it porn naturally objectifying ideas of sex? Like it's a fake setting of sex. Like they're not like, you know what I mean? Like I'm not
If you
saying
have sex with your partner, is that inherently objectifying?
See, I get what she's saying though, Lana, and that was my contention with you as well. I didn't want to go into this because it's kind of like really against the grain on the porn issue. It's like, as far as I'm concerned, if we're not going to start like restricting violent media and like violent shows, I don't see porn. Porn is just an extension of that, as far as I'm concerned, right? But I think I get what you're saying, that it is fake. But yeah, it's fake. So it is when we watch a movie and there's a sex scene. They're not actually having sex and they're not actually enjoying it. They're acting. Same with porn. Now, I get that the influences on porn on like real life material harm seems to be a lot more concrete. But it's like, there's value in pointing crappy things out. But I don't think anyone is actually interested or willing to enforce it to any meaningful capacity. So it's kind of like, yes, we can raise awareness, we can point out that things are shitty, but I don't think anyone is actually willing to go the extra mile and be like, maybe we should restrict children, like restrict in more meaningful, reasonable ways from like teenager under a certain age to like watch porn, or maybe porn should always be like just amateur porn, no fake porn. But I think that's silly, and I think no one would go for it, right? So there is an issue. I'm just not sure what material solutions we actually have dealing with it, except for like raising awareness to the issues and hoping that the porn industry would comply, you know?
I think a big problem with it too is that we exist in an age that is so atomized and individualized. And a lot of people struggle with making connections outside of the internet or just in general. And so I think we see a lot of people reaching for porn and using it as a substitute for those real life relationships. So I think part of it too is maybe helping people to transcend that, or helping people to be less lonely. And then maybe people are less likely to consume porn and to get into these spirals where they're consuming more and more addicting or more and more, extreme pornography.
But it's not just about porn, and I this might be a bit of like a derail, but like just on Twitch, there's like a hot tub swimsuit category thingy. I was shocked. I looked at it like a month ago. I DM'd Prime. I'm like, there's a lady with 3,000 dudes watching her right now in a bra and underwear, and she's not even doing anything. She's just sitting there. What is this? People are actually watching this? What is this supposed to be?
She wasn't just sitting there. But she was.
I have researched. I have looked more at more channels. They're just sitting there. No, sorry. They're doing yoga, or they are talking about their job in their bra and underwear.
Talking about me.
It's like, I'm not shaming. I think anyone can do whatever they want, but I think to just extend this to porn when this is a lot, I think it's a lot more, you don't have to go to the most extreme violent forms of like degrading porn. to see this like slowly assimilate like everywhere in our lives at this point. But I don't think anyone is actually wanting to do anything substantial about that.
So, I guess we'll end it here. I want to respect everyone's time, everyone's schedules here. But this was a really good conversation. To my audience, we will continue on the conversation as we always do in the open walk-on panel right after this. So stick around. The content does not end. It never ends, unfortunately for me. But fortunately for you, the content never ends. So we will have more individuals, right? An open walk-on panel where you can be a part of it. So if you had a problem with the things that were said, and of course you did, well then, and that'll be the time to air your grievances. Okay, all right. Stick around for that. I'm going to give an outro to these amazing individuals, and then we'll continue on from there. But before then, hit that follow button. If you haven't done so yet, if you've been enjoying this content, if you've been loving this content, then hit that follow button right now. Make sure notifications are on so you know I'm going live. We do this 6 nights a week. Don't want you to miss out on any of the content. !social and chat for our social media. We have the Twitters where we tweet. We have Discord where we do everything, including that open walk-on panel. It's going to happen soon, so stick around for that. And then YouTube is where you'll find the VODs. If you've missed any of this, any part of this, then you will find it there on YouTube. Like, comment, and subscribe, please, and thank you. All right. We'll start with Zonia. Once again, Zonia. Oh, wow. Thanks for coming through, being a part of this. Zonia is always a very supportive individual, so I was happy to have her here. Thanks for everything.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. And I wish I could have engaged better with the second topic, but again, it's just such an alien concept to me. Unfortunately, I did what I could. Usually, I'm a little better at riffing off of what other people say and kind of just building from sort of an external view, but couldn't quite pull it off this time. But it was really cool listening to you guys talk about it. So I learned a lot of stuff tonight. Thank you for having me on. Really enjoyed it. Chat, really appreciate you guys. And well, you all know who I am, so I'm not going to do much more of an outro. Anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Pixel, we did it. All right.
I did. You gave me enough notice this time.
No, I gave you like a year and a half notice of what I did.
Yeah.
So, Pixel, though, I am, again, ecstatic that we could actually make this happen. You were lovely, right? It was just great. Like, this is why everyone was like, you got to get Pixel on. I see, right? I see the magic you bring to bear. So, but I would love to have you on again some other time in the future.
Sure.
We'll see. All right, I'll mark it down 2024. All right. Pixel, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me on. And yeah, I generally cover the news way later at night. And yeah, that's it. If you want to follow me, you can. If not, I might be back one day in another year and a half or so. I'm joking.
Thank you. Next, we have Cyrus, a brand new individual. I was happy we have a bunch of brand new people here. So we're always looking for new voices, including you, Cyrus. I thought you were great. You were fantastic. We need more of you. So
Thank
Cyrus.
you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Tell a little about yourself.
I'm pretty new here on Twitch. I'm in the middle of moving right now, and like things are a mess for me, so that's why my internet went down. I talk politics. I'm really interested in this stuff. I will probably be doing like more yelling because that's apparently like my natural inclination.
Oh my god! I just got fucked
I just
in this game.
yell at
God
my
damn
computer
it!
screen when I see other like
This game
Twitch.
fucked me harder
Frankly,
than
when I see
modern
Twitch
porn
streamers
fucked
do
women.
something stupid, I yell a lot. So follow me for that if you want to see that. If you just want to like chill.
Okay. And I gotta say, like, I'm like super jealous. That your view is amazing. I'm looking at that window.
Sick. It's so sick,
This
but you know
game.
what's sad? I'm
This
leaving tomorrow.
game
Oh, this is the place you're leaving. Oh, never.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh well, my next place will be like less impressive.
I wasn't muted when I went
Oh,
like,
Still
all right.
chill.
cringe.
Yeah.
But-
All right. Well, bye, Cincinnati. Thanks so much for that. Okay, we have April. April, thank you for coming through. Right. We needed a final slot filled. Right. And I'm like, I know who to call.
Good to be the last draft pick, Prime. Feels good. Next time, get me first draft with the big guys so I can leech clout off of them. It'll be
Gotcha.
great.
Well, you gotta refuse me for a year and a half, and then you'll be
Okay. I've got to like nag you into bringing me onto the big panels.
I'm
Yeah,
like fighting for them.
follow me, Taftaj, on Twitter, on Twitch. I do all sorts of political discussions, talk to people about all sorts of different things. So yeah, good stuff.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we're skipping you for a second. Shay, thanks for being around. Again, brand new individual. Love to see it. Right? We're always looking for new people. And yeah, thank you for bringing your perspective on all this.
Yeah, awesome. I really had a lot of fun. It was my first like debate panel, so I was all like, okay. And I really enjoyed everyone's views. You can tell that we're all people who've come from like very different walks of life, and I don't know, it's just really cool. And don't watch porn, kids. But
Okay. A message that needs to be heard by the masses. Thanks so much. Okay. We'll go to Zealous. Zealous, I'm always happy to have you around. You had you around the one time, and you Zealous specifically asked for a female space, right? And they don't really exist like that. On Twitch Politics, certainly. There's some like you'll find eventually, like when you're scrolling through just chatting, you'll find like, hey, let's gather all the e-girls for for a thing. But like there's like none with people, at least that I'm aware of, talking about issues like this. So we're glad that we could provide you that space. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. The first night I was here was a little rough, but I had fun. It was my first night streaming as well. I've only streamed a few times since then, and I don't know. It's a lot of fun though. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great. All right. Next, Lana. Lana, you got a bit more bombastic there at the end. I want to engage with you more actually, because I think we could have a really interesting conversation.
I think we'd have a lot of interesting conversations.
Yes, which is another reason why I need to invite you back in the future. I'm going to send friend requests to all of you. If you don't have, if we're not already friends, then I'm going to send a friend request, FYI. But Lana, who is not shy about like her persona, right? You're not quite meek there with that username. But Lana, thank you for coming through.
Lana the God. Little Lana the
Thank you for
Beast
having me.
God.
I actually really enjoyed talking with all of you. I'm like really interested in like hearing from all of you again. If any of you, I'll probably send most of you friend requests if you guys are interested. I'd like to talk with you guys more again. I think this was really cool, and I wanted to thank Kate for inviting me, and I wanted to thank Prime for hosting. So cool.
And I want to thank Katie for inviting all these people. Right, Katie was on top of it. Once again, this. I would only just be getting started streaming today. Today, I usually don't have a closed panel, right? I'd just be rolling out of bed, turning on this goddamn camera, and putting on something, right? But Katie demanded it, and so she helped make this happen. So I thank Katie for using her dominant side. Oh, most women are submissive. You haven't met Katie. Katie, thank you so much.
Firebug, the reason I sold for one cost
for
minions
this,
is
like
all of
this,
these are
this is all
basically
you. So I just want to make sure everyone knows, and you get
reviews,
that kind
if
of
this
credit.
survives. And I want to do lots of damage.
Sonia, about what you said, I really,
fills the button
I would
bigger.
be super interested eventually us
Also,
getting
there's
on
only
an
1-2 of
Amazon
them.
Lily maybe,
Noah's
or
not
just
good.
another panel and just talk about how weird it is to talk to normies about sex. I think you and I had a similar discussion like that before, and yeah, I have a lot to say about that too. So I can play normie, but I can also, like, I think you and I have more in common probably than me and most other people on this panel.
Oh,
so,
also because I
there's
wanted to
that
go to
to
Gender
it.
Triple.
I
remember
am
that
proof
conversation.
that
With the
I am proof that most women are subs, because I subbed Prime into making this panel, and and Cyrus, I did not hear you yell. I would love to hear that. I'm sure Lana can
Yeah, I
train
haven't
you.
broken it out yet. I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, so you should do that. Also, shout out to Lana. It used to be Lana the Goddess. I like that more actually, because God is the fucking loser. You know, goddesses is where it's at. So that's my outro.
Just imagine the
All
crying
right.
blowjob.
Thank you so much. Okay,
God,
we are going
he's
to
not
continue
a
on with our
loser.
open walk on panel right after this. Anyone here can join us. We love you. We love it if you did. And again, I just gotta thank all of you for taking time out of your days. It was really nice. Especially since some of you are in wild time zones, so it's a little harder for you. But seriously, it means a lot. So that we could pull this off. This is a difficult thing to do, actually. But yeah, you can join us in our next panel. If not, that's okay. Thanks for spending your time, your energy, your knowledge, and your passion for my community. I know they appreciate you so much as I do. Have a good one. Bye.
Peace.
Ooh.
Good stuff, guys. Thanks.
Just
All right, we are going to rate someone. We're gonna raid Bastiat. Bastier. Close the StreamYard. Close Twitter. You're not allowed to refuse. You have to say hello to him. And if you don't, I will personally come to your house in a video game and destroy you. Okay. Bye, guys.